Ben Tennyson has lost everything. Now, in a new universe, he must decide, will he return to the role of hero, Ben X Supergirl? Hello there, Omni-sensei here with What If Ben 10 Was in Justice League, Ben 10 X DC Verse, Part 4. If you enjoy this content, please smash the like button. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to check out the original story linked in the description. I hope you enjoy listening to it.
Chapter 15, Doomsday Sanction. The Watchtower. While everyone in the League knew that Ben and Kara were dating, only a select few in or out of the League knew that they were now living together. That small circle included the founding members, Green Arrow and Black Canary, whom Green Arrow had finally started a relationship with, and the Kent family. Most of the people in that group were actually very happy for the couple. The only ones who didn't say anything were the Martian and Batman. When Kara had broken the news to Clark, Ben had, at first, been afraid that he would burst a blood vessel, fry him with heat vision, or both. Instead, he wrapped him in a bear hug and gave him his blessing. Afterwards, the founding members had given Ben a promotion of sorts. He was given the status of senior member, with only a founding member having more authority. His new position meant that if one of the 7 founders were killed, he would take their place. He was also allowed to attend and voice his opinion at meetings with League leaders. If all the founding members were unavailable, Ben was to take operational command until a new group of leadership was formed. 2 months had passed since the two heroes moved in together, and 1 month after Kara's 19th birthday, they had been planning on celebrating their first year together as a couple when they received an emergency summons to the Watchtower. The life of a superhero was full of sacrifices, it seemed. Most of the League was on the island of San Bakuro, helping to evacuate the populace from an erupting volcano. Due to the electromagnetic energy being cast off from the eruption, communications were spotty, at best, and the teleporters couldn't get a lock anywhere near the island. Thankfully, Ben had a solution, at least for the first problem. The communicator in his Ultimatrix didn't rely on the League's communication technology and was unaffected by the volcano's interference thanks to its alien design. The other members of the League could use the Ultimatrix to bounce their signals to each other. Still, in order to be used as a relay effectively for the others, Ben had to remain on the Watchtower. Wonder Woman pointed out that one more hero on the ground wouldn't be as useful as someone who could help everyone at once. His inability to help, however, did allow him to attend an important meeting. Earlier today, Batman had met with the leader of Project Cadmus, Amanda Waller, and now had important information to share. "How long is this going to take?" asked Flash, once all 8 of them had been assembled. "I thought we had an island to evacuate." "The first teams are already down there," said Wonder Woman, "and we'll join them as soon as we're done here." She turned to Batman. "What did you learn?" "Project Cadmus is in the business of developing weapons," Batman said without preamble, "specifically to fight us." "I could have told you that after the incident with the Supergirl clone," said Ben. When the other Leaguers looked at him, he added, "Who else would have done it? I mean, they were capable of creating the Ultiman, so why not a Kryptonian clone?" John nodded. "They're worried we've grown too powerful, and they want to even the odds." Batman went on to tell them about how Cadmus had made simulations about what would happen if the Justice League ever went rogue and how just the original 7 would have been able to conquer the world in just a few weeks. Their evil counterparts, the Justice Lords, had done just that in their own parallel timeline. "That's crazy," said Flash. "We'd never try to take over like that." "If the Justice Lords did," countered Batman, "why couldn't we? We have more than 8 times the numbers as them. We could take over the world in a weekend." "The only reason that those guys went overboard was because their Flash died," said Flash, "so as long as you all focus on keeping me alive, that'll never happen here." The others looked at him for a long moment before the Martian spoke up again. "Let's put a pin in that theory to explore another time. I've seen the federal budget," said Superman, "and there's no funding for a Project Cadmus. Where's the money coming from?" "We're all thinking the same thing," stated Shayera. "Luthor." Wonder Woman spat out the name like it was a curse. Luthor had popped back onto the League's radar after he regained control of LexCorp and again after he announced that he was running for President of the United States and raised even more red flags when his campaign started to gain momentum. "He's the obvious suspect," said Batman. "After all, he funded General Hardcastle's rogue operations. But if he is bankrolling Cadmus, he's doing an excellent job of covering his tracks. I've got the Question looking into it and..." Everyone else, save for Ben, who'd come to trust the faceless man after he helped with the Supergirl clone incident, groaned. "Not that kook," whined Flash. "I admit, he's wound a little too tightly." Batman began. "But if there is a connection, you can bet that he can find it." "Finished, Ben." Batman took up the reins again. "In the meantime, I'll be following the trail from Waller's End." Superman stood up. "If that's all, we have work to do. We all know our stations, let's get to it." As the heroes filed out of the room, Wonder Woman caught Ben's arm. "Hey, Ben, can I talk to you?" Sure, Diana, what's up?" "Well, I guess I want to apologize on behalf of all of us for a couple of things." By all of us, she meant the founding members. "What do you have to apologize for?" "Well, I know how you like to be in the thick of things, but..." Ben sighed. "But I'm needed here the most right now. I may not like it, but I've made peace with that. Also, I know that it's yours and Kara's anniversary as a couple. And she and I both knew that we'd have to make sacrifices, it's part of being a hero. It stinks, but we both know that we have to do the right thing." Wonder Woman's smile turned coy. "I just hope that we didn't interrupt any plans that the two of you might have had for later." Ben glared at her, even with his face turning red. "Don't you have an island to evacuate?" Cadmus headquarters. Amanda Waller held her own war council with the leaders of each division in Cadmus, plus one employee that had issues to iron out. First was Professor Emil Hamilton, head of the science division. Next was General Eiling, head of military applications and tactics. There was also Tala, head of mystical research and personnel. Finally, there was Dr. Milo, a scientist in the genetics department. He fell under Hamilton's supervision, but his recent actions, and subsequent failures, required a meeting with all of the Cadmus leaders. Hamilton opened up the meeting with a progress report on one of Cadmus' most valuable assets. Galatea will be fully recovered soon and ready to return to active duty. "And the Doomsday weapon?" Waller asked about the only thing in Cadmus' arsenal more physically powerful than Galatea. It had been severely injured in a battle with the Justice Lord Superman and had been locked up ever since. "Considering the damage done to its frontal lobe," answered Hamilton, "the cellular regeneration has been remarkable, its EEGs are still flat. Nonetheless, we're monitoring it closely. Keep me updated." Waller turned to the sorceress in the room. "Tala, have you developed a plan to retrieve the armor?" Several months ago, the Justice League had defeated a suit of armor that had been crafted by the Greek gods. It required no wearer and had proven to be indestructible, so Cadmus wanted it. Unfortunately for them, the Justice League had it locked up in the Watchtower itself. "We've come up with some promising scenarios," answered Tala, "but they're going to require certain additional resources." "Fine, see me after so that we can go over the details." Waller switched her attention to the only soldier in the room. "General, how goes weapons development and training?" Eiling looked over his paperwork. "Most of our man-portable equipment should be able to handle all of the League's non-powered members, and some of the metahumans, but for some of the heavy hitters like the aliens and that shapeshifter with all the names. Well, the heavier stuff still has some radiation issues that need to be fixed. I'm not going to send troops out that are going to die before they even get a shot off." "That reminds me, I have one issue that is still concerning," said Hamilton, "both the scans I took of the Ultiman and their sudden disappearance." That had been the only thing that annoyed Waller about Hamilton. He seemed to have an obsession with the original Ultiman. His scans of them, before they'd mysteriously vanished without a trace, had shown that the cellular degeneration had been both reversed and halted. To say that it was a miracle would not have been too far of a stretch, it should have been impossible, save for an act of God. Waller knew who was really responsible, but she wanted to talk to that person first. His past was a mystery, and she hated mysteries. At the moment, the Ultimen are a moot point. It seems they've gone to ground, and we know that the League hasn't contacted them in any fashion. Waller sighed, then turned to the final item on her agenda. And Dr. Milo, she said, looking at the silent man who sat across from her. The other people assembled looked at him with expressions ranging from indifference to barely contained dislike. Splicing together human and animal DNA. How's that coming? Milo, a small man who clearly hadn't slept, shaved, or showered in days, stood up as straight as he could. I know what you're thinking, he said, but my experiments are actually quite close to paying off. I just need a little more time and I promise, I'll have something concrete to show you. Concrete, echoed Waller. Like that superpowered warthog that tore up your lab last week? She glowered at him. Professor Hamilton's already shown me the remains of your lab assistants. All 12 of them. That, started Milo, sweat forming on his brow, that was just an unfortunate accident, and accidents. An unfortunate accident might have 1 or 2 deaths, Waller said with a raised voice, but your actions have now raised the death toll in your department to 64. It should never have even reached double digits. She spent a moment to collect herself. Doctor, I am not known for my sense of humor, but I can see a sick joke when I'm looking him in the face. In light of the lack of results and unnecessary deaths as a result of your work, I'm pulling your funding. Milo's head shot up, his bloodshot eyes widening in shock and horror. Waller continued. In accordance with the Technological Clearances Act, we'll set you up in a new, non-vital capacity and confiscate your research. Waller allowed a grim smile to briefly grace her features. Be lucky you're not being sent to prison or shot. Now, get out. Milo slowly picked up his papers and marched out, his features solemn. However, in his mind, he was already plotting revenge. It didn't take long for Milo to find the right room. He'd had enough clearance to learn where all of the most dangerous weapons in Cadmus were located. None were more dangerous than Doomsday. The monster was kept locked in restraints that not even he could break, and he was created to be even more powerful than Superman. He was huge, easily 10 feet tall and 5 feet wide. His hand alone could wrap itself around a human torso and have room to spare. His brow, teeth, shoulders, elbows and knees seemed to be made out of a hard, bony material. His skin was a deathly gray, with shaggy, unkempt white hair covering his head. The only clothing he wore was a pair of green shorts and boots. Milo approached the monster, confident in his plan and perhaps his madness. Doomsday had been pronounced clinically brain-dead, but Milo hadn't been convinced. He took a deep breath, then spoke. I know you're faking. He took a look at a computer. The lobotomized portion of your brain has completely regrown. Doomsday opened his eyes. Do you remember anything from before? Getting no response, Milo continued. That's all right, I'll show you. You've been used, and you deserve to know. He activated a computer and turned the screen towards the monster's face. It showed a visual history of Doomsday's existence. You see, you were created from a sample of Superman's genetic material. However, your DNA was altered to make you his superior. And then you were trained to hate him. You were conditioned, humiliated, repeatedly injured. The image showed a restrained Doomsday being blasted by heat vision emitted from a hologram of Superman's face. But not by Superman. Milo paused the screen, rage covering his face. No, it was done by Amanda Waller and Emil Hamilton. He resumed the history. When you became uncontrollable, they tried to dispose of you. They put you in a rocket and launched you into space, but you were too strong. Your struggles threw the rocket off course, and it came back down to Earth. The history ended, but Milo's story did not. When you landed, you fought a different Superman, one from a parallel timeline. He lobotomized you. Doomsday finally spoke, his voice deep and gravelly. Superman. Yes, good. said Milo, but he isn't your enemy, your hatred of him was manufactured. At every turn, Waller and Hamilton abused and betrayed you, just as they betrayed me. Don't we both deserve retribution? Doomsday stared at him, unblinking. Yes. Release me. And you'll solve both our problems? Asked Milo. Yes. With a mad grin, Milo typed in a series of codes into a computer. With a hiss, the restraints opened, and Doomsday stepped forward. Milo turned as the monster approached him. What are you? Your problem's solved. Doomsday reached for Milo's face. Aaawa. Doomsday stepped out of the room, just as several Cadmus soldiers arrived and opened fire on him. Their weapons didn't even get his attention. Now for Superman. Doomsday made his way to a Cadmus rocket. He had heard much during his recovery, including where Superman was now. He punched in the coordinates for San Bakuro and hopped inside the rocket. In a few moments, it was gone. In Waller's office, a soldier rushed in, saluting Waller. What's going on? She asked over the noise of the alarms. Ma'am, Doomsday's escaped. Waller's eyes widened in shock. Who in the world would be crazy enough to? Then it hit her. Milo, she growled, slamming her fist into her desk, I'll have his hide for this. The soldier suddenly looked ill. Doomsday beat you to it, ma'am. San Bakuro, thanks to the support of Ben's Ultimatrix, evacuation of the island was going smoothly. Still, there were a lot of people to move, the League had only so many transports, and ship could only hold so many people. The UN had offered to send help, but the people of San Bakuro had been leery of contact with any mainland government for years. They'd only accepted the League's support when they'd run out of other options. While the Ultimatrix was relaying signals, Ben could still use it to stay in contact with Supergirl. Hey, Kara, how's it coming? After a moment, Supergirl responded. Well, I've just finished carrying a boat filled with people to the mainland, and I'm headed back for more. I should be back at the island in a few minutes. Great work. By the way, did you record the end of that show last night? I fell asleep before I could finish it. Supergirl rolled her eyes. You know that I fell asleep before you, Ben. Oh, right. She could practically see the sly smile on her boyfriend's face. Now I remember. Since the two of them had officially moved in together, the two of them had become much bolder with each other, but only when they were alone or when no one else could hear them. They felt that what they shared was between them only. By the way, continued Ben innocently, did you know that you sometimes levitate in your sleep, then fall back down? The impact knocks me off the bed. Supergirl blushed. You and I are having a serious talk when we get home. And I would love to have that conversation when we get there. Supergirl's blush intensified. Oh, shut up, I'm almost at the island. Ben's tone changed, he knew when to be lighthearted and when to be serious. Okay, be safe, I love you. Supergirl smiled, she always did after Ben said those words. I will, and I love you, too. As she landed, she was greeted by Wonder Woman. Okay, glad you're here, Supergirl, I need you too. Kara, are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine, why do you ask? Because your face is all red. Wonder Woman backed up at the look she was being given. Never mind, I don't want to know. Superman was trying to buy time by creating tunnels in the volcano, diverting the lava to areas with nothing to damage. He'd been optimistic when he thought that he could possibly stop the impending eruption altogether. He had just finished with one such tunnel, leading the lava into a large cavern in the volcano, and was preparing to leave when an object crashed through the side of the volcano. Superman could see that the object was a rocket, and what stepped out of it was a monster. It walked towards him, seemingly immune to the lava pooling around its feet. Superman, said Doomsday, I'm here to kill you. Is this a bad time? The gray-skinned beast roared and charged. Superman tried to fly off, but Doomsday was too fast and tackled him into the side of the cavern and into a pool of lava. Holding Superman down, Doomsday delivered a series of punches into his face until he was thrown back by a powerful kick. Using his heat vision, Superman dropped a large chunk of rock onto his opponent, but Doomsday just lifted it above his head. I remember those eyes. Doomsday threw the rock to the side, then tackled Superman again. Holding him down, he drove his bone-covered knuckles into Superman's eyes, blinding him, at least until his healing factor kicked in. Let's see you do that again. Just as Superman began to regain his sight, Doomsday sucker punched him, then tried to crush him with a double blow. Superman dodged it, then sent Doomsday flying into the base of a small cliff. I know who you are, said Superman, but I'm not the one who hurt you. Superman is Superman, said Doomsday, getting to his feet, and I will kill you. Why? It's what I am, I don't care why. Then Doomsday charged, and the battle began again. Cadmus headquarters, GPS puts the stolen rocket smack dab on San Bakuro, General Eiling said to Waller. Doomsday went right back after Superman. I love a well-conditioned soldier. And what will your soldier do after he's killed Superman? Asked Waller. We can't leave him loose. For all we know, he'll try to kill everyone on the planet. He has to be stopped before he leaves that island. But how am I supposed to? I don't care. Get it done. With that, Waller stormed out. After she left, Eiling picked up a phone and dialed a number. Without even waiting for someone to answer, he spoke. This is Eiling, authorization, firewall. Somewhere in the Atlantic, a submarine received orders, confirmation and coordinates. Then, they launched a nuclear missile. A nuclear missile laced with kryptonite. San Bakuro Wonder Woman flew down to one of the last transports, carrying an ambulance. They were close to 75% done. She reached for her comm link. Superman, what's your status? For a moment, Superman didn't respond. Something's come up. Wonder Woman had had plenty of experience as a warrior to know when someone was fighting, but she knew that Superman could handle it. Superman was not handling it. Doomsday was strong, stronger than anything he'd ever fought before. The monster had reduced his costume to shreds, and he was covered in cuts and bruises. Every time he struck, Doomsday struck back harder. He knocked the monster into the lava, and the fight went on. The Watchtower, another transport just landed on the mainland. Batman said to John and Ben, they're almost done. An alarm went off at the panel next to the Martian. I don't believe it, he said after a moment. It's a nuclear missile, headed straight for San Bakuro. Batman and Ben rushed over. And from the spectrograph, its warhead is lined with kryptonite. Ben tensed. Can we hit it from up here? He asked. The Martian shook his head. No, it's moving too fast, but who fired it? Then John turned to see Ben leaving. Where are you going? Ben didn't even turn his head. You guys figure out the who and why. If you can't stop it by the time I reach the Javelin Bay, I'll take care of it myself. What about communications? You heard Batman, Ben snapped. They're practically mopping up, they know how to finish. Batman watched him leave, then grabbed a phone. Cadmus headquarters. Waller was organizing some papers on her desk when a phone rang, a certain phone that only one person knew the number to. She picked it up. Yes, Mr. President? Call off the missile. Waller froze. That wasn't the president's voice, that was. How did you get this number? The missile is heading for San Bakuro, snapped Batman. Waller froze again. If anyone dies on that island today, I'm coming for you. Waller regained her composure. You do what you have to, and so will I. She marched out the door and into the war room. Eiling, she roared at the aging general. The Watchtower. Batman hung up the phone. She didn't know. Captain Adam is on his way from Southern California, John said to Ben over the communications. His top speed is only Mach 2, said Ben as he ran to the Javelin Bay. He'll never make it in time. And even if I can, he thought, I don't think that jet ray can take down a nuke safely. He made it to the Javelin Bay and rushed to one of the ships. He activated the Ultimatrix. Guess I'm gonna need more firepower. He slammed down the dial. Upgrade. Upgrade wrapped himself around the javelin, making it larger, faster and better. He sent an emergency release signal from the computer, and a hatch underneath the ship dropped him outside the watchtower. He fired his upgraded engines and rocketed toward San Bakuro. Upgrade, came John's voice over the radio, you're coming in too fast, you won't survive re-entry. Obviously you don't know what I'm capable of. Said Upgrade. As if to prove his point, his engine's power increased. I should intercept the missile in 2 minutes. Cadmus headquarters, what were you thinking? Waller demanded of Eiling, you're going to kill Superman and everyone else on the island. Eiling didn't look troubled. We have to sanction Doomsday, we were going to get to Superman somewhere down the line, and we've been trying to stop drug traffic from San Bakuro for years. The way I see it, 3 birds, 1 stone. Waller glared at him. Call it off. Eiling shrugged. Anti-abort safeties are already engaged. I couldn't stop it even if I wanted to. Waller seemed to sag, then stared at the map that was showing the path of the missile. God help us all, she thought. San Bakuro Upgrade could see the missile, only a few hundred feet ahead of him. Several miles ahead of that, he could see the smoking volcano of San Bakuro. He tried to destroy the rocket part of the missile with a missile of his own, but it was deflected off. The missile's got some sort of magnetic shielding. He reported to the watchtower. After a moment, Batman's voice came over the radio. The only chance you might have to get through that shield and survive would be to set an opposing charge on the hull, then eject. Understood. Upgrade would have smiled if he had a mouth. Man, Kara is going to kill me for this. Meanwhile, Wonder Woman received a call from John. The message was filled with static, so Ben must not have been on the station, for some reason. Wonder Woman, can you hear me? There's a missile with a kryptonite warhead heading for your position. Say again. She prayed that the interference was making her hear things. I repeat, there is a kryptonite missile heading your way. Wonder Woman knew of only 2 reasons why a kryptonite missile would be launched, and Supergirl had taken another boatload of refugees to the mainland. That only left. Flash, get everyone as far away as you can. I'm going back for Superman. Flash tried to protest. But. Do it now. Then she flew off to the volcano. The last of the refugees made it off the island just as the volcano erupted, however, neither Superman nor Doomsday noticed. Superman was on his last legs, literally, he could barely stand. As Doomsday began to choke the life out of him, Superman blasted him in the face with his heat vision. Doomsday roared in agony but slammed his fist into the Man of Steel, sending him flying. Mocked Doomsday, can't beat me the same way twice. Superman struggled to his feet. Then I guess I'll need a bigger fire. With the last of his strength, Superman unleashed a barrage of punches and kicks, stunning Doomsday long enough for him to pick him up and hurl him into the open mouth of the volcano. With his energy spent, he fell to his knees. He couldn't even think about escaping the oncoming lava. He was completely spent. So it was with great relief for him that Wonder Woman flew in and pulled him out, just in time. Upgrade approached the missile as carefully as he could, then gave the hull of the javelin an opposing charge. Just before he connected, he withdrew to the escape pod and launched. He'd given autopilot instructions to move the missile away from the island or the path of refugee ships. That would have to be enough. As he flew back, the nuke went off. The blast of energy was so great that Upgrade turned back into Ben. For a moment, all he saw was the explosion, then, he saw nothing at all. The Watchtower news about the missile had spread quickly through the League, and the members who'd been on the station rushed to the observation deck to see what could be done, or at least find out more information. When they arrived, they discovered what Ben had done. The entire League, save for the injured Superman, had been scrambled in a desperate search for their teammate and friend. Ben had indeed been found and was rushed to the Watchtower's infirmary. However, the search party had found one other thing. They'd located Doomsday. The creature was encased in lava so dense that not even he could break out. at least for now. 2 days after the battle, the founding members, save for Batman, sat in front of him. "Did Cadmus create you?" asked Superman, now recovered from his injuries. Doomsday said nothing. Superman turned to the Martian. "John?" John's eyes glowed for a moment. "I can't read his mind. His brain's been altered to be immune to my methods." Superman continued. "You don't owe anything to them, they manipulated and tried to kill you." Finally, Doomsday spoke. "So I keep hearing." "From whom?" "All you need to know is that I will get free, and I will kill you." Superman sighed. "If that's your final word." He pulled up a strange device that looked like a cross between a vacuum cleaner and a computer. "I only use this as a last resort. It's going to send you to another dimension. You won't be hurt, but you also won't hurt anyone else again." Doomsday glared at him. "You'll wish you'd killed me." Without another word, Superman activated the Phantom Projector, sending the monster to the Kryptonian prison dimension. For the last 2 days, Ben had remained unconscious. Everyone had been assured that he would recover, but he needed rest. While every member of the League checked in on him at some point, Supergirl had stayed at his side for the entire time. She wouldn't let Ben wake up and wonder where she was. Outside the room stood a brooding Batman, who turned when he saw Superman and Wonder Woman walk up to him. "How's he doing?" asked Wonder Woman. "He's predicted to wake up soon, maybe in a couple of hours." Batman spoke without looking at them. "You sent him off to the Phantom Zone, didn't you?" "He left us no choice," said Superman. Spoken like a true justice lord. Superman reeled back, as if he'd been struck. "What? Passing judgment like gods? With our superpowered army and our orbiting death ray? Cadmus is right to be scared. The human race wouldn't stand a chance." "We'd never go there," argued Wonder Woman. "It isn't in our nature, and nothing can change that." "Nothing?" Batman turned to Superman. "What if Luthor does become president, like he did in their world? What would stop you from killing him, just like that Superman did?" Superman shrugged. "There's always that kryptonite you carry around." "You don't get to joke," snapped Batman. "Not today, Ben just took a bullet for you." He began to stalk off when he felt a hand on his shoulder. "I'm sorry, Bruce." "You're right. But you don't have to worry about the Justice League, trust me, you know me." Batman stared at them for a moment. "Yeah, I do." "Come on," said Wonder Woman, "let's go, we don't want to wake up Ben by accident." Batman finally nodded, and the three walked off. Inside the room, Ben began to stir. He slowly opened his eyes and looked around. He recognized this place. He was in the infirmary, which meant that he was alive. He heard soft breathing nearby. He turned his head to see Supergirl sitting on the chair next to his bed, asleep. He slowly reached out and took her hand in his. She must have been sleeping lightly. Her eyes shot open at the touch, and she stared at him. "Ben?" Ben smiled. "That was my name last time I checked." Supergirl gently moved forward and gave him a gentle, loving embrace, which he returned. "Don't you ever scare me like that again." She buried her head into his shoulder. Ben could feel tears wetting his shoulder and could feel a few of his own building as well. "I promise." Normally, he'd make a joke about the whole thing, but not today. They had come too close to losing each other for that. Supergirl let out one more sob, then took a deep breath and sat up. She wiped her eyes, then an impish smile crossed her face. "Good," she said. "You can't die yet, we still haven't celebrated our anniversary." Ben's face went red, and here he thought that it was too soon for jokes. In the interim. Veiled threats. San Francisco. After the incident on San Baccaro, Ben had been sent home for a much-needed break. Even before getting injured, he had been putting in more hours than most of the other heroes. Ben had tried to object, but he'd been overruled by the senior members and was thus back home in San Francisco. Of course, that didn't mean that he couldn't do his job and protect his city, but since he was rarely needed there, it was more of a part-time job than anything else. For the first few days of his temporary exile, Kara had stayed with him, and they enjoyed being a normal couple for that time. Unfortunately, Kara was soon needed elsewhere. The League required her to help end a dispute between two neighboring star systems, and that left Ben alone. So Ben ended up doing what he normally did when he wasn't with Kara or being a superhero. He was making money in the stock market. Since coming to this universe, Ben had never spent much money to begin with, save for his car, but he knew from experience that heroes needed resources of some kind, and almost all resources cost money. Ben might have been wealthy, thanks to Bruce Wayne, but he had decided to make some extra, just in case he needed something expensive. He had turned into gray matter and, using his vast intelligence, figured out what to invest in. It wasn't insider trading or anything illegal, he was just being smart with his money. After a few hours of that, Ben went on patrol, spending more time than usual to make sure that everything was fine. Normally, he'd be happy that everything was quiet, but after spending so much in the League and going from one crisis to the next, he found himself getting restless without something to do. He remembered telling Supergirl to enjoy the downtime, and now he saw the irony. Still, he wanted something to happen. Cadmus headquarters Amanda Waller sat in her office, reading the latest report on the members of the Justice League. While she wasn't responsible for finding out their weaknesses, she did review their files in case they were updated and something new was to be learned. Knowledge was power, and Waller considered herself very powerful. "Excuse me, ma'am." Waller looked up and saw a Cadmus soldier in her doorway. "Professor Hamilton would like a word with you, ma'am." Waller sighed, then nodded. She had a feeling that she knew what Hamilton wanted to discuss. It had moved beyond scientific curiosity and into a disturbing obsession. Waller had to constantly keep the professor busy with other projects in order to distract him. Sadly, Hamilton was able to complete every task presented to him with incredible speed, and always returned to his most discussed topic. Ben Tennyson and the Ultimatrix. Cadmus had easily discovered the identity of the shape-shifting hero. If Batman's identity had been uncovered, there was no way that Ben could hide his own. Still, they had no reason to try to blackmail Ben with this information, at least not until he did something to warrant such an action. As Waller made her way to Hamilton's lab, she reflected on just how worrying the wielder of the Ultimatrix was. He had dozens of different alien forms and more powers than the entire Justice League put together, and Waller had a sneaking suspicion that they hadn't seen all of Ben's transformations yet. It was entirely possible that he had even more powerful forms that he'd yet to reveal. Something more powerful than way big was a terrifying prospect. Waller entered Hamilton's lab, only to be greeted by a horrible noise. It sounded like nails on a chalkboard mixed with a chainsaw against wood. "Hamilton!" Waller shouted over the noise, "Turn that racket off." After a moment, the noise died down, and the professor stepped around a large machine that he'd been behind. The machine looked like a massive microscope, but instead of a lens, the device had laser cutters, saws, and other instruments attached. "Ah, Mrs. Waller," said Hamilton, "I'm glad that you're here. I've made a few interesting discoveries since you were last here." "This better be good, Professor," Waller growled, "and it better be about that new kryptonite delivery system." After the debacle of San Bakuro, kryptonite-laced missiles had been declared off-limits, and thus Cadmus required a new way to fight Kryptonians. "Oh, that," Hamilton waved dismissively at a bulky rifle lying on a table. "The prototype is ready for testing. Once it passes inspection, we can begin construction of at least 24 more with the resources available." Despite Waller's dislike of Hamilton's obsession, it did motivate him to finish his projects faster, if only to return to his pet project. "If it's finished, then what do you want to show me?" "This." Hamilton led Waller over to his computer, where he brought up a series of statistics on all of Ben Tennyson's aliens. "I've been going over our data on these alien forms, and I believe that we might be able to incorporate some of their abilities into our genetics program. We might be able to give our soldiers incredible regenerative abilities or invulnerability. If I could get that device, the Ultimatrix, the possibilities would be endless." Waller didn't show it, but she was becoming decidedly uncomfortable with what Hamilton was suggesting. she had no problem with creating artificial humans with superpowers, like the Ultiman, but she didn't like the idea of changing a normal human into a monster. She would order such a thing, if necessary, but that was one line she hadn't crossed, at least, so far. "Professor, I appreciate your enthusiasm," Waller lied, "but I'm not going to have our soldiers getting combined with alien DNA unless we have no other choice. We have another plan to take down the League if it becomes necessary, and unless something happens to that plan, I see no reason to change it." "But the Ultimatrix is still a wild card," Hamilton protested. "As long as that many powers exist in one person, there are too many variables to rely on only one plan." Waller tapped her chin in thought. "From our observations, it seems like Galatea could fight him one-on-one. She was able to fight one of those ultimate forms. Still, you do have a point. I have another plan, however, one without risk to a team of soldiers." "You do?" asked Hamilton, surprised. "How are you going to obtain the Ultimatrix so easily?" "Simple." Waller smirked. "I don't know if we can obtain the device, but maybe we can do something about its user. San Francisco, and that, kids, is why you look both ways before crossing the street." XLR-8 looked at the two boys he'd just prevented from being hit by a car. "Okay, Mr. Alien, we will." The older boy, who looked around 8 years old, said seriously. The younger one reached into his backpack and pulled out a bag of cookies. "Thank you, Mr. Alien. Do you want a cookie?" Thanks." Taking a cookie in his talons, he popped it into his mouth. "Now you kids get home now, all right?" Both boys nodded, then ran to a nearby house. XLR-8 ran back to his own home, his extended patrol finally over. He'd spent an extra 2 hours patrolling, and in all that time, he'd stopped a purse snatcher, put out a fire, and now he'd just saved those kids from becoming a smear on the ground. He transformed into Ghost Freak, phased into his home, and then turned back to normal. Impressive. Ben spun around to see Amanda Waller sitting on his couch, her fingers interlocked and positioned so that only the top half of her face was visible. "What are you doing here?" Ben snarled, his hand reaching for the Ultimatrix. "I'm not here to fight, Mr. Tennyson, so you can stop reaching for the Ultimatrix." If Waller had hoped to rattle Ben by revealing that she knew who he was and the name of his watch, she was disappointed. All Ben did was raise an eyebrow. "You don't seem surprised." Ben shrugged. "If you could figure out who Batman is, what chance did I have?" His hand, however, did not move away from the Ultimatrix. "Now what do you want?" "I'm here to offer a deal." Waller stood and walked up to him. Her head didn't even reach up to his chest, and he might have been one of the most powerful people on the planet, but she didn't even blink. Ben had to give her credit for that, at least. What kind of deal? There was no way that Ben was going to do anything for Cadmus, but maybe he could learn something useful. "I want you to work for Cadmus." Ben stared at her. And what? You think I'm just going to join up with you people, with no incentive?" Ben shook his head. "Because you have more than a few points against you right now. Is protecting the world from the threat posed by the Justice League not a good enough reason? What do you have against Cadmus? Are you kidding me?" Ben began ticking off reasons on his fingers. "You people cloned Supergirl, then sent that clone off to kill people in order to cover up your dirty little secrets. You created the Ultiman, giving them a false past, then you took them off to have who knows what done to them." Ben chose not to reveal that he knew the final fate of the Ultiman, safe in his own universe. "Then there was the fact that you sent a nuclear freaking missile against a civilian population, all to try to destroy Doomsday, one of your own creations." Ben didn't actually have proof that Cadmus created Doomsday, but the odds were pretty good that they had. "The incident with Doomsday shouldn't have happened," snapped Waller. "He was released by a mentally unstable scientist, and the missile was launched without my authority." Ben sneered. Inwardly, he was smiling, since Waller had all but confirmed that they'd created Doomsday. "Well, it looks like you've got a personnel problem, don't you? You're not making a good case for recruiting me." Waller took a deep breath. That problem is another reason for you to join us. Your sense of right and wrong could do well to curtail some of Cadmus' darker aspects. She held out her hand, as if she expected him to shake it. You have an incredible amount of power. If the Justice League ever went rogue, we'd need an even greater amount of power in order to stop them. And you want that power to come from me? Let me tell you a little story. He turned away from her, though he activated the Ultimatrix and set the dial to wrath, just in case. I know the threat of having too much power. It can be intoxicating and addicting. A few years ago, I was once put in a position where I had limitless power. I could have reconstructed the entire universe in any way I wanted. Waller's eyes widened at the implication. This boy had, at one point, become a god? But I chose not to. I didn't do it because there were people with me who knew who I truly was and wouldn't let me force my will on the universe like that. The same thing is true for the League. We won't let another member join the bad guys, and if they do, we'll stop them. We don't need a shadowy group like Cadmus to keep us in check. We'll do that on our own. And what happens if you're wrong? Waller demanded. What happens if the entire League turns, and no one is around to stop you? Ben walked over to his door and opened it, gesturing for her to get out. If something like that were to happen, then you're welcome to take your best shot. It won't happen, though. As Waller began to leave, Ben grabbed her shoulder and gave her a glare that would have made Batman proud. But know this, he warned, if you ever try to attack the League, if for no other reason than out of your own fear, there won't be a rock for you to hide under. I will find you, and I will end you. Waller saw the look in his eyes. She had seen the eyes of stone-cold killers look more merciful than the retribution promised by this young man. We're done here. As she walked out, she gave Ben one last look. I think we know where the other stands. Watchtower, she tried to recruit you. Superman shouted, his hands gripping the armrests on his chair hard enough to warp the metal. How could she think that would work? After Waller's visit, Ben had gone back to the Watchtower and called for an emergency meeting with the senior members. He told them about what happened, and like Superman, they were outraged. They would have been the same for any member of the League, but Ben was like a little brother to them. I'm not sure that it's supposed to work, said Batman. Of all the Leaguers, he was the most composed. I think it was supposed to shake Ben's faith in the League so that if Cadmus did ever attack us, he would at least stay neutral. Well, it didn't work. Ben sat up straight. Cadmus has crossed the line with their genetic experiments. I'd never join them, and I know that you guys will never go bad. Neither will anyone else in the League. Still, there is a problem, said Shayera. Cadmus knows where you live, and you basically threaten them. They'll know that they could easily take you out in your sleep. Your security is at risk. Ben shrugged. My security was at risk back in my own universe, back when everyone found out my secret identity. I'm not worried. And what about the Ultimatrix? Asked Batman. What if they get their hands on it? Even if they only unlock a few of the powers it contains, it could give them an army of metahumans, all trained to fight us. Until the situation with Cadmus is over, you're going to stay on the Watchtower. Ben looked ready to protest, but the other Leaguers looked like they would support the Dark Knight's decision. He sighed. He was getting used to going home with Kara after a long day of being a superhero. However, Batman had made a valid point. He had enough experience with people trying to take the Ultimatrix. Okay, fine. I don't suppose I can have some of my stuff brought up from home? Some of the other Leaguers nodded, and with that, the meeting was adjourned. As Ben walked out to head to his quarters, he was stopped by Shayera. Ben, are you really all right? She put a hand on his shoulder. You don't have to act like you aren't scared. No one will judge you. Ben smirked. Shayera, I've faced supervillains, alien invaders, mad scientists, and a space god, all while dealing with high school. A bunch of Shadow Ops guys aren't going to make me lose any sleep. Shayera nodded. Good. She started to walk away but then turned back. Speaking of sleep, remember that you'll be here most of the time, so try to get some rest. Take it easy with poor Kara, okay? Ben put his hand to his forehead and groaned. You guys will never let it go, will you? Shayera pretended to think about it. Nah. At Cadmus headquarters, Amanda Waller stood in front of Professor Hamilton and General Eiling. The general didn't seem to care about the failure to sway Ben Tennyson to their cause, but Hamilton looked ready to break down in tears, probably because he knew that Cadmus would sooner destroy the Ultimatrix before letting it out of their control. As you said before, Professor, the Ultimatrix is a wild card, but now we know that it's a wild card devoted to stopping us. Waller sat down in her chair with a scowl. It doesn't matter, said Eiling dismissively, that kid can only turn into one freak at a time, we'll be able to take him down, it just might be a little costly. Hamilton took a deep breath. I suppose you're right. While the aliens inside of the Ultimatrix aren't as powerful as, say, Superman, it is his variety that makes him such a threat. Waller nodded. Well then, we'll put Tennyson on our second highest priority. Unless something changes, Superman is now on top of the list. The three stood up and walked into another room, where they met their benefactor. And I know that you're just the man for the job. Waller said. Lex Luthor smiled. Chapter 16, Clash Metropolis. The citizens of Metropolis did not normally fear for their lives, at least not from things like supervillains or falling airplanes. Superman was always there for them, and the people of Metropolis were his strongest supporters. The same support could not be said for the other heroes of the Justice League, which was why mobs of civilians fled in terror from the current brawl occurring downtown. The supervillain Parasite, a mutated human that was purple with white stripes on his body, had escaped from prison and was currently fighting several members of the League, Elongating Man, who could stretch his body into any shape, Metamorpho, who could turn his body into any kind of chemical reaction, Batman, and Heat Blast. Elongating Man was currently unconscious. Parasite's power allowed him to absorb the energy out of people and, in the case of metahumans, their powers with just a touch. He could even use those powers just as well as the original wielders. It reminded Heat Blast of Kevin, except that Parasite could do that without going insane. Metamorpho tried to hit Parasite with a wave of acid, but the villain used his new rubber body to slither out of the way like a snake. Heat Blast managed to contain him with a wall of fire but couldn't risk getting close. The possibility of Parasite absorbing all of the powers of his aliens was too great a risk. Before Heat Blast could get another shot off, Parasite turned his lower body into a spring and launched himself over the flames, tackling Metamorpho as he did so. With a scream of pain, Metamorpho felt his powers being taken away before he fell into unconsciousness. Batman threw an explosive batarang at Parasite, but he merely turned his entire body into a gas, emerging unscathed. With Metamorpho's power, there wasn't much that either Batman or Heat Blast could do. Metamorpho could respond to new situations just as fast as Ben could. John, we're in trouble. Batman said into his communicator. Are you asking for help? The Martian's response was incredulous. Yes, we both are, yelled Heat Blast. Neither of you ever asks for help. Just get us some reinforcements. Barked Batman, as he and Heat Blast dodged a stream of acid. In the skies over Metropolis, a passenger plane was going down. Its wing had caught fire due to engine trouble, and it was headed straight for the city. As its wing sheared off, the passengers began to pray. One little girl, however, looked out the window next to her seat to see the prayers answered. Superman was coming to save them. The Man of Steel used his super breath to put out the fire, then flew underneath the plane to guide it to the airport. As he did so, he heard his communicator chime. Superman, came John's voice, you are needed. I'm in the middle of something, Superman replied, can it wait? Unfortunately, no, it's the Parasite. Superman began to lower the plane. Give me half a minute and I'll be right. He didn't finish his sentence, as a red blur zipped past him, the wind knocking his cape over his head. What was that? Superman wondered as he landed the plane and took off to help his teammates. Great, I'm gonna have to deal with an ultimate Parasite. Heat Blast thought, as Parasite jumped at him. There was no time for him to dodge, and he wasn't sure how to beat him in the first place. Just before the purple metahuman reached him, however, a red blur smacked the villain into a building. What the? Heat Blast was confused until he saw who the blur was. Hey, Captain Marvel, glad you could join the party. Captain Marvel was a tall, muscular man with a red costume that had a gold lightning bolt on the chest. He had a white cape with gold trim slung over one shoulder. He had short, black hair and a confident smile. I wouldn't miss it, Heat Blast, Marvel replied. He always called Ben by whatever alien he turned into, while most of the other Leaguers had trouble remembering the names of more than a handful of his forms, but I don't think that Parasite is quite welcome to this party. Yeah, he's getting to be a pain. I can't get near him, or else he'll get the Ultimatrix. Does that Wisdom of Solomon have any ideas? Captain Marvel tapped his chin in thought. Wisdom isn't the same as knowledge. Hey, Batman, what could stop Parasite at this point? Batman glanced at Parasite. He has Metamorpho's powers, however, all chemical reactions stop at sub-zero temperatures. He looked at Heat Blast. You might need something a little colder. Got it. Heat Blast slapped the Ultimatrix dial and disappeared in a flash of green light. Articuana. Heat Blast had been replaced with a blue, bipedal lizard wearing a black bodysuit. He was hunched over and had several large fins coming out of his spine. This should help him chill out. Batman didn't react at the joke, but Captain Marvel actually laughed. He was one of the only Leaguers who ever laughed at Ben's puns. Even Kara only laughed occasionally. Articuana took a deep breath and released a blue beam of light at Parasite. Once it hit him, his entire body was covered in ice. Once he's unconscious, the powers and energy he stole will be returned to their owners. Batman said to Captain Marvel. Marvel, understanding, rocketed towards the frozen villain and hit him with a powerful punch. The blow was enough to instantly knock Parasite out. As Batman tied him up with one of his bolas, Elongating Man and Metamorpho came to and made their way over to the others. Good work, Metamorpho said to Marvel. He gave Articuana a light punch on the shoulder, his way of saying thanks to the younger hero. It was nothing, really. Captain Marvel said modestly. Elongating Man stretched his neck, bringing his head closer to Marvel. Hey, I think he's blushing. He joked. Sure enough, a hint of red had appeared on the captain's face at the praise. Seriously, Marvel, you got here just in time. Articuana was honestly complimented. I'm sure you would have figured something out, said Marvel. Well, thanks for not making my brain work too hard. The alien joked. He and the others, minus Batman, shared a small laugh. Don't be modest, kid, said Metamorpho. I don't even think Superman could have done a better. He trailed off as Superman landed next to the group. Hey, we were just talking about you. And you are? Superman asked, his question directed at Marvel. Oh, that's right, said Elongating Man, you were on a space mission when we recruited him, and you never met before now. I'm Captain Marvel, sir. Marvel held out his hand to Superman. And it is a real honor, you're my biggest fan. Excuse me, asked a confused Superman. Sorry, I'm your biggest fan, it's a little overwhelming meeting you. It's a pleasure, Captain, said Superman, though Articuana didn't hear any enthusiasm in his voice, a real pleasure. With the introductions out of the way, the heroes began to make their way out of the area but were stopped by a crowd of reporters, Lois Lane among them. All of them began to barrage the captain with questions, while the others stood back. Articuana in particular wanted to see how Marvel handled being swarmed by the media. Please, folks, one at a time. Marvel held his hands out in a placating gesture. Lois spoke first. Lois Lane, Captain, from the Daily Planet. How does it feel to be part of the Justice League? Marvel smiled. How does it feel? Like I've waited my whole life for this. I mean, being on the same team with Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman. He chuckled for a moment. I still can't believe they actually let me join. All of the reporters gave a small laugh of their own. "What is it you value so much about the League?" asked Lois. "Golly," said Marvel, as if he'd never even considered the question before, "I guess it's all the good they do. Not just helping people, which is great, I mean, that's the reason we're all here in the first place, right? But they really make a difference, they change the world." Articuana nodded, he couldn't put it better himself. "How so?" Lois asked him. "Well, just look at Lex Luthor," said Marvel. "He used to be a supervillain, for Pete's sake, and now he's one of the good guys." Articuana didn't necessarily agree with that, but he had to admit, despite Luthor's past, the man hadn't done anything to put him back in prison. He donated to charity, was researching cures for diseases and even building orphanages. He still doubted that he would ever trust Luthor, but even if he had some nefarious scheme in the works, at least some good was coming out of it all. While Marvel was being interviewed, Articuana noticed Superman's hands clenching at his sides, especially when Marvel commented that it was good that Luthor was running for president. "Let's go," ordered Superman. In a moment, he and the others, minus Captain Marvel, were teleported away. Watchtower. The next day it had been a month since Ben had been relocated to the Watchtower. In that time, he'd gotten to know each of his teammates better, though it did make seeing Kara a little difficult. They still went out, but both of them had gotten used to living together in Ben's house, though they had started to call it their house. A lot had happened over the last month. 5 supervillains, under the command of Cadmus, had infiltrated the Watchtower while most of the League had been away, and had stolen the Annihilator, an indestructible, semi-sentient suit of armor forged by the Greek gods. Fortunately, Wonder Woman and Hawkgirl had tracked the suit down into Tartarus, the Greek underworld, and destroyed it, with the help of Hades. As a result, the 2 female Leaguers found their friendship slowly beginning to rebuild. Sadly, another Leaguer, Huntress, had been dismissed from the League. She'd tried to kill the man who'd murdered her family and, with the help of the Question, finally tracked him down. That search brought the 2 into conflict with Green Arrow and Black Canary, but the 4 managed to put aside their differences and stop the murderer from escaping U.S. custody. As far as Ben knew, Huntress and Question now had a very passionate, but very weird, relationship. Ben had actually been expecting a lot of teasing from the other Leaguers about his own love life, but surprisingly, he'd only received a few good-natured jokes from Green Arrow and Flash. Everyone else knew that Ben had to be there for his own safety and that any strain on his and Kara's relationship was completely Cadmus' fault. At that moment, Ben was telling Kara about the recent battle with Parasite while they got lunch. "Wait a second," said Kara, "Captain Marvel actually laughed at that stupid cold joke?" Ben gave her a grin. "Maybe he appreciates my sense of humor." "Or lack thereof," said Kara with a smile, robbing the joke of any malice. "So," said Ben as they sat down, "what do you think of the new guy?" Kara thought about it. Though Captain Marvel had only been a part of the League for a short while, he'd already made friends with nearly every member, Kara and Ben included. He was nice, funny, and brought a sense of hope wherever he went. Kara had yet to meet someone who hadn't walked away from talking to the man without a smile on their face. "I think he's a good guy," she said. "He's going to be fine here." "Of course he's a good guy," said Ben. "I don't think we'd let him in if he was a bad guy." Kara lightly punched his arm. "You know what I mean, he's just likable." Ben gave a look of mock hurt. "You're not going to dump me for him, are you?" Kara gave him a quick kiss. "Never in a million years." Further flirtatious banter was cut off when they noticed Captain Marvel walking across the room, a rather angry expression on his face, that worried both of them, as they'd only ever seen a confident, friendly smile on his face before now. "You think something's up?" Ben asked his girlfriend. "Yeah, I heard Superman bring him over for a meeting. I heard some raised voices, but I wasn't paying attention to what was said." Ben looked at her, confused. "How did you hear a meeting going?" He suddenly understood when Kara tapped her ear, reminding him of her super hearing. With a gesture from Ben, the 2 stood up and walked after Marvel. "Hey, Captain." Captain Marvel turned to see Ben and Supergirl, the latter of whom had called out, as they caught up to him in a hallway. "Oh, hey, what's up? Why don't you tell us?" Ben asked, "Did something happen?" Marvel sighed. "The founding members, well, Superman really, got mad at me for the papers saying that I was endorsing Luthor for presidency." "Well, we aren't supposed to take sides in politics," said Ben, "but even if it is Lex Luthor, I don't see why you would get anything more than a slap on the wrist." Captain Marvel looked a little ashamed. I may have overreacted when Superman said that some people don't change." "Overreacted how?" asked Supergirl. Now Marvel looked sheepish. "I may have dented the conference table." "Okay, look," said Ben, "I'm not saying that people don't deserve second chances. Back home, my best friend tried to kill me more than a few times, back before we became friends. But Luthor has put the entire world in jeopardy, and he's tried to kill every founding member of the League at least once. It was because of his money and his tech that General Hardcastle put me in a coma." Supergirl commented bitterly, crossing her arms. Ben put a comforting hand on her shoulder, while Captain Marvel looked guilty. He had forgotten about that incident. It was at least partially Luthor's fault that Superman's last surviving Kryptonian relative had been hurt. If he was being honest with himself, if someone had hurt his family, he wasn't completely sure that he'd be able to forgive them either. Ben continued. "Most of the League will probably never trust Luthor, but I think we're all willing to at least wait to see what he does. If he's clean, well, good for him. If he's dirty, we'll bust his butt." Captain Marvel nodded. "Okay, I see what you're saying. I still think that everyone deserves a second chance, but I can see how keeping an eye on him could be a smart move. All we ask is that you look at both sides of this argument," said Supergirl, "before you make a mistake that you'll regret." The couple walked away, leaving Captain Marvel alone with his thoughts. "You think he'll be okay?" asked Supergirl as she linked her arm through Ben's. "I think so," said Ben, smiling when Kara put her head on his shoulder. "I guess he just needed someone to talk some sense into him, someone who isn't Superman." Metropolis, a few hours later. Normally, Superman was pretty adept at avoiding attacks. Even if he was invulnerable to almost everything, it was still annoying to get smacked into the side of a building. Nevertheless, that's exactly what happened, courtesy of a large, super strong member of a new metahuman gang that had attacked Metropolis. He, Batman and Ben, now as Spider-Monkey, had easily caught up to them. They weren't exactly a challenge, but Superman had other things on his mind. He had yelled at Captain Marvel, a hero who meant well but seemed a little too naive. In retrospect, all Marvel had done was what he thought was right, but supporting Lex Luthor, of all people. On top of that, Luthor, who'd avoided all contact with Superman for months, had openly invited the Man of Steel to a charity he was hosting, commemorating the construction of Lexor City, a large part of Metropolis that had been repurposed to offer jobs and housing to the less fortunate of the city. It stank of a trap. "You were a little hard on the Boy Scout, don't you think?" asked Batman as he used a set of electrically charged brass knuckles to punch out a man dressed like a Lookador. Superman knocked his own opponent into the side of a building. Part of the wall collapsed on top of him, burying him and taking him out of the fight. "I thought I was the Boy Scout." "So did we," said Spider-Monkey, as he swung on a string of web and kicked a man with a glowing crowbar, "until we met Captain Marvel." "What do these guys want anyway?" asked Batman, after he knocked his own opponent into a phone booth. "To take over the world," answered Superman, as the man with the crowbar ran at them, along with a man that looked like an armored baseball player, or Rob Banks. "I forget." The baseball player threw a metal sphere, the heroes ducked, and the sphere hit a van with enough force to smash it into pieces, while the other struck his crowbar against the ground, creating a fissure that spread towards them. "Okay, enough of this," said Spider-Monkey. "It's time to go ultimate." He twisted the dial on his chest, then slapped it. In a flash of green light, Spider-Monkey's body had changed. He looked like a blue gorilla, with 3 toes and fingers and 4 spindly spider legs coming out of his back. He looked much more imposing than before. Ultimate Spider-Monkey. His new voice was much deeper now. Ultimate Spider-Monkey shoulder-checked the baseball player, knocking him to the ground. As he tried to rise, his face met a large, blue-furred fist. While he didn't get up again, Ultimate Spider Monkey didn't want to take chances. He opened his mouth, and after his lower jaw split down the middle, spat an enormous net of webbing onto the man. "But back to Captain Marvel," said Superman, as he wrapped the last man's own crowbar around his body. "Why are you two? Why is everyone defending him?" "We like him," Batman said, before he knocked out the last villain. "Yeah," agreed Ultimate Spider Monkey, "he's sunny." The heroes had no time to relax, however, as Superman heard an alert from his communicator. "Superman?" "Yes?" the Kryptonian answered. "This is Emil Hamilton. John was kind enough to patch me through." "What is it, Professor?" Hamilton wouldn't have called through the Justice League communicators if it wasn't important. "There's something here I think you should see." "You guys go," said Ultimate Spider Monkey. "I'll make sure the cops lock these guys up." Superman nodded. "Okay, we'll see you at the Watchtower." STR Lab. Superman and Batman were a little surprised to find out that Hamilton's lab had been robbed. The security there was some of the tightest on the planet. "Still, if it's just a simple robbery," asked Superman, as they walked alongside the professor, "why call us?" "It was anything but simple," replied Hamilton. "They ignored valuables, priceless gems, and high-technology artifacts. In fact, the only thing they took was the contents of this safe." He gestured to the open safe in question. Nearly 4 pounds of weapons-grade kryptonite. After nearly an hour of examining every part of the safe, Batman put away his gear. "So?" asked Superman, clearly impatient for the answer. "The lock was nanopicked," replied Batman, "LexCorp technology." "Then Luthor," began Superman. "Which anyone could have gotten their hands on," interrupted Batman. "Or, for that matter, planted here to incriminate Luthor." "You know it was him," Superman argued. "I'm not entirely convinced," Batman replied. "This is pretty sloppy for Lex." Superman scoffed. "He's the most arrogant human being on the planet. He wants us to know." "Maybe," was Batman's only reply. "Maybe." Superman couldn't believe what he was hearing. "I'll go to the Watchtower," said Batman, "and see if the Atom can find something I missed." He began to walk out. "Since when do you miss anything?" asked an incredulous Superman. "Since when do you jump to conclusions without evidence?" countered Batman. He turned to Superman. "Go to that charity event tonight. You'll help raise some money and keep an eye on our elusive Mr. Luthor." Watchtower. That night it was a slow night for the League. There hadn't been much to do, and many Leaguers had gone home. It was fortunate for Ben and Kara, who'd found that they had most of the station for themselves. Normally, they'd never act like this on the Watchtower. They had had a quiet dinner and enjoyed each other's company. Now, they were standing next to a window that looked out into space. Kara had her back against Ben, who had his arms wrapped around her. "It's been a while since we had a night like this," commented Kara as she reached up and placed her hand against Ben's cheek. "We should do this more often." "Yeah," Ben agreed, "we should." Kara closed her eyes in pleasure as Ben placed kisses on her neck, working his way up to her jaw, then her lips. "Now, Ben," Kara said slyly, "we wouldn't want to do anything naughty right now, would we?" "We wouldn't?" asked Ben, a coy smile on his face. "Remember, we're still technically on duty right now. What if something happens?" Honestly, Kara hoped that that wouldn't be the case, but she and Ben both knew their responsibilities, even if they hated them at times. Ben shrugged. "Hey, maybe the universe is giving us a break tonight?" He placed another kiss on her cheek. "Ben, report to the transporter room immediately." John's voice boomed over the PA. Ben sighed, while Kara turned around to look at him. "You just had to jinx it, didn't you?" "Yeah, I know," said Ben, "I'm an idiot." "Go on," said Kara, "I'll see you when you get back." She gave him a quick kiss, and then Ben ran off. When he got to the transporter room, he found John working at the teleporter controls. "What's going on, John?" John turned to him. Superman is fighting Captain Marvel at Lexer City. Ben blinked. I'm sorry, I must have heard you wrong. Did you say that Superman and Captain Marvel are fighting each other? I did. Apparently, there is a device underneath Lexer that is kryptonite-powered. Ben's eyes went wide. Luthor says that the device is a temporary generator, which will be disposed of once the next set of generators are installed. Superman, however, believes it to be a bomb and is trying to destroy it. Captain Marvel is attempting to stop him since they do not have enough evidence to suggest that it is a weapon or not. What do you want me to do? Asked Ben. You know both of them. Try to stop the fighting before half of Metropolis is leveled. Lexer City. As Ben, now transformed into Diamond Head, teleported down, he saw that John wasn't kidding about Metropolis at risk. There were craters pocketing the area, and half of a building was torn down. He ran towards a group of people, civilians, reporters and some police officers. He also saw Lex Luthor among them. Where are they? Diamond Head demanded without preamble. Luthor was about to answer when Captain Marvel flew overhead and crashed into the street, Superman not far behind him. What exactly do you plan to do? Asked Luthor. Diamond Head stared at the battling heroes. Marvel had gotten back up and had delivered a haymaker that sent Superman into the air. I'm not sure, admitted Diamond Head, but I think you should help get everyone out of here, Luthor. He jerked his chin in the direction of a group of children, many of whom were crying. Lex nodded. You're right, of course, I'll help with the evacuation of civilians. With that, the crowd began to hurry off. Well, that's one problem taken care of, Diamond Head thought. Now how the heck am I going to stop two of the most powerful people in the league? As he saw the two heroes flying at each other, an idea came to him. From what he understood, there hadn't been any time for the two to work things out. Superman had just charged straight in. Maybe all he needed was a chance to talk things over. He slapped the Ultimatrix dial. Gravitack. This alien was a large humanoid made of orange rocks, with a red stone embedded in his center. Okay, said Gravitack, let's get M on the ground first. He ran forward, close to the fighting, and raised his hands. A white glow surrounded both his hands and the two people above him. Both fighters found themselves feeling very, very heavy and plummeted to the ground. While both were strong enough to resist Gravitack's power, the suddenness of it caught them by surprise, and they hit the ground in front of him. You two finished now? Asked Gravitack. Superman shook his head, as if to clear it. He glared at Gravitack. What are you doing, Ben? There's a kryptonite bomb right there. He pointed at a hole in the ground. I'm going to stop it. If Gravitack had eyebrows, one would have been raised. Really? It looks more like you're beating the snot out of Captain Marvel. He glanced at Marvel. No offense. None taken. Captain Marvel was clearly the worse off of the two. He was covered in scratches and bruises, and his costume was torn. But I don't think that it's a bomb. Why would Luthor put a bomb right under his feet? That would kill him, too. Superman struggled to stand, fighting against Gravitack's power. We don't have time for this. The bomb has to be stopped. In response, Gravitack upped the gravity further, pinning the Kryptonian to the ground. Neither of you is going anywhere. I'll check it out and see what it really is. If it's a bomb, I'll take care of it, and if it's not, well, you've got a lot of apologizing to do, Superman. He slapped the Ultimatrix dial. XLR-8. With that, XLR-8 rushed to the hole that Superman had pointed to and dove in. Inside, after traveling down several stories of scaffolding, was a large, vaguely rectangular device. A timer was counting down to something, but XLR-8 knew that whatever it was counting down to would occur in only 2 minutes. He slapped the Ultimatrix dial again. Gray matter, the small alien crawled over the device, inspecting every feature, but taking care not to actually open it up, his brilliant mind hard at work. He began to mumble to himself. No, that's not it. The trigger mechanism would be right here, but, well, I'd have to check. He put a hand against the side of the device. No, the composition is all wrong, the vibrations indicate that. His head shot up. Well, I'm certainly surprised. Superman and Captain Marvel stood up, the gravity powers finally wearing off. Superman had memorized how much time he needed to get to the bomb and get rid of it. Now, thanks to Ben and Captain Marvel, he wasn't sure that he'd be able to get to the bomb in time. He flew towards the hole, praying that he'd get there in time, when Chromastone jumped out. "Get out of the way!" barked Superman. "Wait for it." Chromastone crossed his arms and looked at a nearby street lamp. None of the lights in Lexer were on, because Luthor said that the generator wasn't up and running yet. After a few seconds, the street lamp flickered, then began to shine. Then the rest of Lexer followed suit, save for the building that was damaged. Superman looked around, confused. "What? I don't. It wasn't a bomb." Chromastone said, "I checked over every inch of it as gray matter. Yes, it's kryptonite powered, but the pieces powering the generator are such low quality, I'm pretty sure that even if it was a bomb, the blast wouldn't give you more than a bad headache." Superman just stood there, shocked, while Captain Marvel heaved a sigh of relief before swaying on his feet. Chromastone rushed over and caught him before he fell. "Easy there, tough guy," he said. "Why don't you find a quiet place to rest while I handle things here?" Marvel nodded, then flew to the top of a nearby building. He had a feeling that he was going to have a talk soon anyway. Superman was still standing there, his mind almost unable to comprehend that Lex Luthor was innocent. That he, Superman, was the bad guy in this. If it hadn't been for Captain Marvel and Ben. Several reporters, along with Lex Luthor, approached the two aliens. "I can't thank you enough for stopping this misunderstanding before things got too out of hand." Lex Luthor held his hand out to Chromastone. For a moment, he almost shook it, but then he got a look at Luthor's eyes. They held a cold intellect, smarter than most people he'd met, but as much as he tried to hide it, his eyes also showed disappointment. Instead of shaking his hand, Chromastone only nodded. The Justice League will pay for the damages," said Superman, finally getting over his shock and gesturing to the half-collapsed building. "No, this one's on me," replied Luthor. "How about I take care of it and no one has to spend a dime?" Without waiting for an answer, Chromastone slapped the Ultimatrix dial. Clockwork, the metal alien stomped towards the ruined structure and raised his hands. A green beam of light shot forth, and before everyone's eyes, the building reassembled itself, brought back to the condition it was before it was destroyed. After taking a moment to breathe, Clockwork made his way back to Superman. "You, me and Marvel are having a talk. Right now." Superman only nodded, picking up Clockwork and heading towards Captain Marvel. When they reached the captain, Clockwork turned back into Ben and sat down. All of those transformations, plus the energy drain from using his time powers, left Ben exhausted. Captain Marvel, on the other hand, was looking much better. In fact, he looked like nothing had happened at all. As Ben took a moment to rest, Superman and Captain Marvel looked at each other warily. Neither was really sure what their standing was with the other. Finally, Ben stood up and looked at them both. "You're both idiots." The Man of Steel and the world's mightiest mortal stared at Ben in shock. Ben sighed. "You," he said, pointing at Superman, "jumped to a conclusion about something. You had no evidence, and you took it upon yourself to try to fix a problem, even though you had no idea what you were doing." Then he turned his attention to Captain Marvel. "You just jumped into the fight. You could have said something like, 'Hey, Superman, why don't we see what this device really is before we do something stupid? Maybe we can call a specialist in the League, since they can just teleport in someone like it's nothing.'" Superman and Captain Marvel looked at each other. After a moment, Superman took a deep breath and walked over. "Captain," he said, "I'm sorry for the way I've treated you. I was out of line, and you were right to call me out like you did. I hope that you can forgive me." He held out his hand. Captain Marvel looked at the extended hand, then at Superman's face. A small smile appeared on his own. "Superman, sir, I can forgive a man who knows that he made a mistake. I just hope that you can forgive me for blindly thinking that Luthor was trustworthy. I know his history makes that hard, and I promise to be more wary of certain people from now on, but... His eyes turned hard. But I won't stop thinking that people can get a second chance. Superman nodded. And I won't ask you to do that, son. It's hope like that that'll lead the way to a better tomorrow. Ben coughed, drawing their attention. Look, this is all well and good, but can you continue this discussion at the watchtower? It's dark and cold, I'm exhausted, and I promised Kara we'd watch a movie later. Superman and Captain Marvel laughed. Watchtower. The next day the founding members of the League looked at each other, then at Superman. The Man of Steel had his head in his hands after he told them what had happened at Lexer. They all knew how close to disaster yesterday had been. If Ben hadn't been there, said Superman softly, if Captain Marvel hadn't tried to stop me. It wasn't your fault, Clark. Said Batman, they set you up. How can it not be my, wait, they? Batman nodded. Luthor Estate, things went well, all things considered. Lex Luthor pulled out a bottle of wine and popped the cork. Superman is now seen as paranoid, and if the leader of a group is unstable, what does that say about the people he leads? He poured the wine into 2 glasses. Things might have gone better if that alien shapeshifter hadn't gotten in the way, but the seed of doubt has been sown. He handed one of the glasses to the shadows, where it was accepted by a smirking Amanda Waller. To victory, Mrs. Waller. To victory, Mr. Luthor. Chapter 17, Mystery in Space. Watchtower. And then, the crazy miner sets off all of his explosives, and we barely make it out alive. Ben finished his story to Shayera, who laughed. The two of them were sharing a shift on the observation deck, and since monitor duty was boring, Ben was keeping both of them entertained by telling her about some of his adventures back in his universe. How you survived all those close calls is a miracle, Shayera commented. Ever tried going to Vegas with that kind of luck? Ben shrugged. I don't think it'd be fair to anyone else. Shayera raised an eyebrow. Since when is anything in Las Vegas fair? I remember when we went to stop the Joker from blowing the whole city up, and when John tried to move one of the bombs away, the Joker detonated it. Speaking of John, said Ben, how are things between you and him? He had been glad that those two had finally gotten back together, but he hadn't heard how their relationship was going. We've been taking things a little slower than, say, you and Kara. Ben rolled his eyes at Shayera's comment, but we've talked about moving in together at some point. It's not like I'd have a lot of stuff to move, since I live here on the watchtower. I understand, Ben said, but still, I'm glad that you're together. I can tell you make each other happy. Shayera gave a wry smile. Glad you think so, but some other people. She trailed off. Vixen? Ben had seen Vixen flirting with Green Lantern nearly every time those two had been in the same room. He must have been annoyed that John had been holding out for the Thanagarian for so long. Shayera nodded. She hasn't done anything, she's a complete professional during a mission. I just wish she'd stop wasting her time giving me dirty looks. You want me to talk to her? Ben offered. Since Shayera's return to the League, Ben had been the unofficial peacemaker between her and the Leaguers who didn't trust her. Thankfully, when Wonder Woman had finally gotten over her own issues with Shayera, many of her naysayers had also followed suit. Sadly, there were still a few diehards, and Vixen was one of them, though she might have acted the way she did out of petty jealousy. Shayera gave Ben a glare, knocking him out of his musings. Please, Ben, if I could get upset from just a few dirty looks, I'd have broken down years ago. Sometimes, Ben forgot that Shayera was an accomplished soldier years before she became a superhero. Before the conversation could go any further, they heard John's voice above them. Shayera. Both Ben and Shayera heard the urgency in John's voice. Shayera spread her wings and flew up to the Martian's position, while Ben, who was curious to see what was going on, followed on foot. He found the two in front of a communication screen, along with Green Lantern. On the screen was an alien, though Ben couldn't identify the species or even the gender through the large helmet the alien wore. Shayera, said John, pointing to a readout in front of them, is that what I think it is? The Thanagarian looked at the data. It's transuranic iron ore. Nth metal, like my mace, but unrefined. What about it? We're stranded on a rock that's pretty much made of the stuff. The voice of the alien sounded strange, no doubt due to the helmet worn on its head. We're just miners. Are we in any danger? From the alarmed look on Shaira's face, the answer was yes. Sit tight, don't move and don't touch anything. She spun around and headed out. Prep a javelin for me, I'm on my way. Wait, John ordered, I'll send you a support team. Don't need one, Shaira retorted, I'll handle it myself. That wasn't a suggestion. John's eyes glowed dangerously. You haven't been pulling your weight as a team leader. Shaira was indignant. Excuse me. You're not alone anymore, John said calmly, so stop behaving as if you are. As much as Ben hated to admit it, John was right. Ever since returning to the League, Shaira had hardly ever led a team of her own. Most of the time, she was grouped with other founding members or on her own. For a while, Ben had thought that it might have been because of the mistrust from the other Leaguers, but maybe Shaira just didn't want to work with them. I'll go with you, offered Green Lantern, probably so that if Shaira had to be grouped with someone, it might as well be with someone that she trusted. No, you won't. John gave Lantern a sharp look. You're both founding members. I don't want any question about who's leading the mission. I can go, Ben said. I'm not a founding member, and under the rules we established, Shaira outranks me. Plus, I'm probably the best person to have if we run into something unexpected. You just want to get out of monitor duty. Accused Green Lantern with a mock glare. Ben shrugged unrepentantly. That's just a bonus. I'll go too. The four heroes turned to see Vixen approaching them. John considered that for a moment. Fine. Javelin 26 is ready on pad 9. I'll also have Vigilante go with you as additional security. Ben had mixed feelings about Vigilante. On the one hand, he got along with the guy fairly well, even if he dressed and acted like a crazy cowboy. On the other hand, he was another member of the Do Not Trust Shaira Club. Still, maybe this mission could show both him and Vixen that Shaira was worth trusting. With a huff, Shaira relented. Come on. She, Vixen and Ben left. As soon as the elevator doors closed after them, Green Lantern glared at John. Yes? John had an idea of what Lantern was going to say, even without using his telepathy. Why did you do that? Demanded Green Lantern. Neither Vixen nor Vigilante has spent much time in space, it's good experience for them. You know what I mean. Green Lantern growled. Putting my girlfriend on the same team as the woman who's always hitting on me and a crazy cowboy, both of whom hate her guts? I have no doubt that they will act professionally on a mission. John turned back to the communication screen. And even if they don't, Ben is with them, he should balance everything out, should something occur. He re-established contact with the alien. I've assembled a rescue party, help is on the way. I don't know how to thank you. The alien bowed its head as the screen in front of it went black. Then it pulled off its helmet, revealing a very human-looking face. The bulky spacesuit fell away, revealing white, form-fitting body armor with a gold trim. A pair of large, gray wings spread from the alien's back. But I'm sure I'll think of something. Finished Lieutenant Perron Dull, of the Thanagarian Empire. Just outside the site of the distress call, no, barked Shaira as the javelin dropped out of light speed. Reset your hyperdrive vectors. Though Vigilante, who was piloting the javelin, wore a red bandana that covered most of his face, anyone looking at him could tell that he was frowning at her. No one likes a backseat driver, ma'am. Shaira glared. You need another 20 hours of flight time before you're certified. And some of us are already right certifiable. Vigilante's words were muttered and muffled by his bandana, but Shaira still heard them. Vigilante, if you've got a problem with me, we can take it to the gym after the mission's over. Vigilante shook his head. No, ma'am, resetting vectors. As the javelin began to descend to the surface of the planet, he said, maybe you ought to think about riding side saddle for a change. Shayera started to rise out of her seat, but Vixen, seated behind her and next to Ben, placed a hand on her shoulder. Let him be, she said, men have fragile egos. Ben raised an eyebrow, but Vixen ignored it and kept talking. To get what you want, you have to know how to talk to them. Yeah, I don't really do that, said Shayera, tapping the handle of her mace. So I've heard. Vixen smirked. But maybe you should learn. Surprisingly, neither the smile nor the comment had any malice behind it. Shayera still huffed and looked away. While she was busy fuming, Ben turned and whispered to Vixen. Okay, what's going on? Yesterday you looked like you wouldn't care if Shayera got hit by a truck, and now you're giving her advice? Vixen sighed. I don't know. Maybe I'm starting to see that John will never be with me. I can't stay bitter at Shayera for something that neither of us has control over. Ben was surprised by how honest Vixen was being, both with him and herself, as well as her change in attitude. It was a pleasant surprise. Maybe he wouldn't have to soothe any frayed nerves today. He gave her a smile. Hey, don't worry about it, I'm sure you'll find someone. He looked to the front of the javelin. Maybe Vigilante? Vixen glanced at the gun-toting hero, who was directing several colorful Texan idioms towards the controls. Ben and Vixen glanced at each other, then only partially suppressed a case of the giggles. Something wrong? Shayera had gotten over her anger and looked behind her to see two of her teammates holding their sides and snorting. Nah, nothing, said Ben, straightening in his seat, just laughing at a joke. Shayera said nothing, the javelin coming to land on the surface of the planet. Around them stood a lush jungle environment and a breathable atmosphere, according to the sensors. Before they left the javelin, however, Vixen tapped into the snake's ability to see heat and looked around. Guys, I'm not seeing a mining ship out there. Ben frowned. The people they were supposed to help had said that they had come to this planet to mine. What happened? Shayera went back to the sensors. There's nothing on the instruments, either. Vigilante raised his hands in protest. I followed the distress beacon, just like in the manual. Shayera gave him her best reassuring smile, which was basically an expression that wasn't a scowl. Not saying you didn't, but this is weird. She fiddled with the sensors. I'm not detecting any nth metal, either. Vigilante took out one of his pistols and checked the bullets. We could sit here studying on it all night, or we could go take a look-see. Shayera thought about it for a moment. All right, but stay sharp. This looks funky. Ben, we're going into a mine. Do you think you could use Armadillo? Ben nodded. Sure thing, just let me go outside to change. Armadillo was a good choice. If something happened while they were inside a mine, he could just tunnel a way out for them. As soon as the javelin's ramp lowered, Ben transformed into the large, yellow alien. The four walked to the mine's entrance, when Vigilante squatted to get a better view of some footprints. Somebody was here, he mused aloud. Maybe they went into the mines. They walked inside, Shayera leading the way. The darkness of the mine was illuminated by the crackling energy of her mace. Vixen and Vigilante stayed close to Armadillo. If they needed to get out fast, they'd have to stay right on his tail. After a few moments of walking, Shayera stopped and squinted at one of the support struts. Something wasn't right. What is it? Asked Vixen. Shayera knelt and waved the mace near the strut. No matter where the light moved, the shadow stayed the same. When the mace actually made contact, it passed through the strut. The whole mine's a hologram. Shayera shouted, we've been suckered. Move. Armadillo grabbed the two women and shoved them behind him, just as a blast of energy ricocheted off of his armor. The four backed out of the mine, Armadillo using himself as a shield, while Vigilante returned fire from around him. As soon as they exited the mine, however, more shots from the surrounding jungle fell all around them. Back to the javelin, Shayera ordered, even as she deflected a shot with her mace, we'll take cover there. Vig, lay down some cover fire. Ben, turn into something that can help him. On it. Armadillo slapped the Ultimatrix dial. Chromastone. The purple alien simply absorbed the energy blasts and used them to empower his own energy-based attacks and sent them right back at the attackers. He also used himself as a shield for Vigilante, the only normal human of the group. Since they couldn't see what they were fighting, the heroes had no choice but to make a mad dash for their ship, dodging, or, in Chromastone's case, absorbing, energy blasts all the way. Shayera looked up, just in time to see a large rocket headed straight for. Scatter. All four dove out of the way just as the rocket hit the javelin, blowing it to pieces. The shockwave sent all of them flying. Shayera caught herself in midair, as did Chromastone. Vixen used her natural agility to land on her feet, but Vigilante was slammed into a tree. Shayera picked him up and yelled for the other two to take cover. Chromastone swooped in and picked up Vixen, making sure that any energy attack sent their way would only hit him. The two landed at the top of a large rock formation and were quickly joined by Shayera and Vigilante. Shots from their still unknown attackers hit their cover, and Vigilante started returning fire, only to get dragged back down by Shayera. "Can you even see what you're shooting at?" she snarled. "Nope," said the cowboy, reloading his pistols, "just keepin' 'em honest. Giving away our position is more like it," she yelled. "Hey," Vixen interrupted, "how about we fight the bad guys instead of each other?" "Wait a second," thought Chromastone as he stood up, ignoring the energy getting absorbed into his body. "These lasers look really familiar." "Ben," said Vixen in a warning tone, "I know you think that Chromastone can't be hurt by energy attacks, but I don't think that this is a good time to test that theory." "Shayera," Chromastone said, ignoring Vixen for the moment, "does this energy remind you of anything?" Shayera stopped and really looked at the energy flying over their position. Now that she thought about it, her eyes widened in recognition, just as the shot ceased and a voice rang out. "Shayera Hole." The other three Leaguers poked their heads out from cover alongside Chromastone and saw an unexpected and unwelcome sight. Thanagarians, 5 regular soldiers, along with 1 female in white armor. Behind them stood another Thanagarian, minus his wings, and strapped into a bronze exoskeleton. All of them were armed and looked very angry. "Perandul?" Shayera barely whispered the name, but the others heard her. "Friend of yours?" asked Vixen. Had this encounter occurred even a few days ago, she might have been snide about it, but now she was just annoyed. These Thanagarians had laid a trap for her teammate and dragged them all into it as well. "Huh," commented Vigilante, "birds of a feather." "Not the time, dude," Chromastone hissed. "Did you really think you could get away with betraying the entire Thanagarian Empire?" Perandul's voice was a mix of arrogance, grief and rage. "Hold up," Vigilante whispered, "I thought we were the ones she betrayed." "Sounds like she betrayed everybody, cowboy," commented Vixen. "Yeah," said Chromastone, "but at least she joined the right side in the end." "I should know, I was there." The two heroes glanced at him in surprise. They'd heard stories of Ben's exploits in the past, but he'd never said anything about helping to stop the Thanagarian invasion. It took them both a moment, but they realized that it was probably out of respect for Shayera. He didn't want to bring up any unpleasant memories. Perandul continued. "You helped the Justice League and that shape-shifting freak to destroy my hyperspace bypass." "Freak," repeated an indignant Chromastone. Shayera called out from behind her cover. "I only did it to stop you from killing everyone on Earth. That bypass was our last hope." Suddenly, all emotion save for grief left Perandul's voice. "Without it, we were helpless against our enemies." Then the rage came back. "Because of you, the Thanagarian Empire lost the war." The Leaguers were shocked. They hadn't realized that by saving the Earth, they'd doomed another species. Even Vigilante, who hated Thanagarians, wasn't unmoved by this news. Shayera, however, took it the hardest. Her posture slumped, and a single tear fell down her face. "Nothing to say, traitor, or hadn't you heard?" Perandul stood there, mocking Shayera's pain. Shayera's head snapped back up. "Hro," she said softly, then raised her voice, "What happened to Hro?" Chromastone remembered Hro Talak, the commander of the Thanagarian invasion and, at one point, Shayera's betrothed. He'd beaten Hro as ultimate Swampfire back on Hro's flagship. After the bypass had been destroyed, Hro had ordered a withdrawal from Earth. In Ben's mind, he hadn't been that bad a guy, aside from the whole, trying to destroy mankind, thing. Paran Dul sighed. After you and the Justice League destroyed the bypass, our fleet was ordered back to Thanagar. By the time we exited hyperspace, the Gordanians had already begun their final assault on our home world. For a moment, Dul's voice became proud. In their minds, the war was over, but not for Hro Talak. He single-handedly destroyed a dozen of the enemy battleships. But finally, the battle was lost. Of our entire fleet, only Hro Talak's ship remained. He ordered us into a scout ship. We barely made it out. With his final breath, he destroyed the Gordanian flagship. Paran Dul brought herself out of her own memory. Too little, too late. The war was already lost. I didn't know, whispered Shayera. Did you? Chromastone didn't know how to put this delicately. Did you still have feelings for him? Shayera sighed. For a lot of people I've let down. Chromastone, Vixen and Vigilante glanced at each other, an unspoken agreement made between them. Despite any misgivings, they wouldn't let anything happen to their teammate. All we want is Shayera whole, said Paran Dul. If you hand her over, the rest of you can go free, even you, Shapeshifter. If you choose to fight with her, you will most assuredly die with her. Let me think on that. Vigilante stood up and unleashed a fusillade of bullets at Dul, who took cover behind the shield she'd been holding at her side. With a snarl, Dul pulled out an energy pistol and opened fire, but Chromastone caught the shot on his arm, absorbing it. Shayera grabbed Vigilante by the shoulder. You don't speak for the team, she growled. I do. Maybe I should let them take me. Like horse hockey. Vigilante shot back. Pardon my French. We're the Justice League, added Vixen. We don't turn our backs on our teammates. We won't let them take one of our own, Chromastone finished, even as he sent blasts of energy at the Thanagarians. Kreger, shouted Dul. Take care of the freak. Yes. Mumbled the Thanagarian in the exoskeleton. He charged forward and grabbed Chromastone by the face. Chromastone tried to shoot the offending arm off, but the metal was made of sterner stuff. Kreger lifted Chromastone up and slammed him into the ground, then did it over again. Ben! Yelled Shayera. We need to go now. Okay, thought Chromastone, let's see how he likes this. Chromastone built up his energy and then released it in one blinding, but otherwise harmless, blast. Kreger might have had incredible strength and resilience, but his eyes were still organic, and that meant that they could be blinded. In a reflex, Kreger released Chromastone, vainly trying to shield his eyes. When the light faded, and the Thanagarian's vision returned, the heroes had vanished. Paran Dul gritted her teeth in frustration. They'd almost had the traitor. This is a waste of time, said one of her soldiers. We should be headed back home to join the resistance. Not until the traitor is dead, was Dul's response. Or until she kills us. The soldier didn't get a chance to say more, because Kreger wrapped his giant metal hand around his throat. No, he rasped, we're here to kill Shayera. Calm down, Kreger, calm down. Dul put a hand on Kreger's metal elbow. We're killing her though, right? Kreger's voice was pleading, like a child that wanted a toy. Of course, Dul assured, now put him down. Kreger threw the soldier to the ground and stomped towards him. Don't confuse me, he warned. My head doesn't work so good since. He seemed to think about it. It doesn't work so well. But I remember that it's Shayera's fault I'm this way, right? During the invasion, Kreger had been Hro Talak's chief lieutenant. He and a squad of soldiers had stormed the Batcave but had been defeated by the League. The heroes had needed the security codes that he possessed, but he wouldn't give them up. As a last resort, the Martian Manhunter had taken the information, using his telepathic powers in a violent manner. As an unintended result, Kreger had suffered severe brain damage, as well as paralysis. In order to get him into fighting shape, he had been placed inside of his new body. He was now only a weapon to be unleashed in a direction. Right, that's right, agreed Dull. She hurt us all, and we're going to hurt her back. Kreger nodded, then used the thrusters on his back to fly off, while Dull helped the soldier to his feet. I'm just saying, the soldier continued, Shayera Hole was an instructor in espionage wing. She's better trained than all of us put together. Dull didn't look impressed. Then we'll just have to outthink her, won't we? Vigilante spotted one of the Thanagarian soldiers flying just over the trees that they were hiding under and drew a bead on him. Before he could fire, however, Shayera pulled his arm down. Hold your fire. What? Demanded Vigilante. That's Loco. I got him. He wouldn't be flying so low unless he wanted to be seen, replied Shayera. Vixen walked up to them. You think he's a stalking horse to trick us into revealing our position? She said it as a statement, rather than a fact. Sounds smart, commented Ben, who'd needed to turn back to normal and allow the Ultimatrix to recharge. Risky, but smart. What makes you so sure that's what he's doing? Asked Vigilante. Because that's exactly what I would do, answered Shayera, and I'm one of them. Okay, I'm gonna stop you right there. Ben walked up and looked her in the eye. You might be the same species as them, but you are not one of them. Why's that? Asked Shayera. Because if you were one of them, you'd be up there, hunting us down. Ben gestured to the others and himself. But you're not, and I'm sick of you saying that you deserve getting treated like this, just because you made a mistake. You're down here, trying to keep us all alive. I don't care what anyone else says, Shayera, you are one of us. He glanced at Vigilante and Vixen, who stepped forward. Ben's right, said Vixen. Right now, I don't care what you did in the past, and I don't think that you should, either. If you can stop beating yourself up, I'll consider the slate wiped clean. Vigilante nodded. I reckon we should save the one Hawkworth Savon. After all, you did help save Earth, I reckon we owe you for that, at least. Now come on, Miss Special Ops, where to? Shayera stared at them, shocked by their support, simply nodded and marched off, the rest of her team right behind her. After a few minutes of walking, Vigilante spoke up again. Hey, Vix, why don't you use them animal powers of yours and give us a leg up? Vixen gave him a look. I live in a loft in Chelsea, Vig. What makes you think I know anything about the jungle? Vigilante took off his cowboy hat and rubbed the back of his head in embarrassment. Ben sighed and moved forward before his friend dug himself into a deeper hole. Do we actually have a plan, Shayera, or were we just going to walk aimlessly through the jungle for a while? I do have an idea, said Shayera. I just wanted to get under some deeper foliage first. The other three looked at her expectantly. We should split up. Ben, you come with me, Vig, go with Vixen. We'll spread out and find their ship. We can either use it to get back to Earth or call for help, whatever we get time for. Might be easier if there weren't so many hawks in the sky, commented Vigilante. Think we should thin the herd first? Shayera shook her head. No, we can't afford to slow down for anything. The second they even suspect what we're doing, they'll move the ship into orbit, and we'll never get to it. We'll have to be sneaky and smart about this. Vigilante nodded, the plan making sense to him. Ben gave a lazy salute to the pair. You guys better get there. Vixen gave Vigilante a pat on the back. I'll make sure he comes back in one piece. Shayera gave a small smile. Good luck. Vixen and Vigilante marched through the jungle, doing their best to avoid branches and roots. For a while, it was silent but awkward between them. Finally, Vigilante tried to strike up a conversation. So, now we know what old Ben was doing during the invasion. What about you? Vixen shrugged. I fought them as best as I could. Couldn't do much, there were too many of them for a straight fight, but I like to think I did some good. What about you? What did you do? Suddenly, Vigilante regretted bringing up the subject. I fought M2, but, well, I got caught. They locked me up in a tiny cell. It was humiliating. He didn't want to say any more than that, and Vixen could see it. She could also see. You're hurt, she pointed at Vigilante's leg, which had a bad gash on the shin, courtesy of a Thanagarian energy weapon. I was in a fight, remember? Recalling his treatment at the hands of his one-time captors had made him a little snappish. Why didn't you say anything before? Vigilante shrugged. Didn't want to raise no fuss. Vixen sighed. Men. She ripped off the torn part of Vigilante's pant leg and wrapped it around the wound. That'll hold for a while, at least. Vigilante tipped his hat. Much obliged. Vixen could tell that the cowboy was smiling underneath his bandana, and she returned it. So, if you don't mind my skin, why you be in, so nice to Hawk girl? Ben said it before, explained Vixen, as they continued to move. Shayera made a mistake, and she's had to live with it. Now she's got another piece of guilt, the end of her species' civilization. I can't be so petty about Green Lantern when the girl's already got all that hanging over her head. Vigilante nodded, if a little reluctantly. I guess you're right, darlin'. No need to kick while she's down. Vixen gave him a smirk. Darlin', she echoed, then laughed as she saw a hint of red on Vigilante's face that wasn't his bandana. Further conversation was halted when an energy blast ripped forward and struck the spot between them. Vigilante whipped out a pistol and fired in the direction of the offending shot. He was rewarded by a cry of pain as a Thanagarian soldier fell out of a tree, clutching a wounded wing. Another soldier flew towards them, firing his rifle as he moved. No time for a shootout, cowboy, we gotta move. Vixen picked Vigilante up and tapped into the power of the cheetah. In a blur of motion, they were gone. So, Shayera, what changed your mind? Shayera was focused on clearing some bramble in front of them and didn't think about Ben's question. What do you mean? I mean, 1 second you were all, I deserve everything that's coming to me, and now you've suddenly got this, I don't know, spring in your step. Shayera raised an eyebrow. Spring in your step? Who says that anymore? Ben sighed. Just answer the question. It looked like Shayera was about to when a blast of energy shot towards them. She managed to deflect it with her mace, but she was put on the defensive. Ben reached for the Ultimatrix, but before he could even activate it, Kreger fell out of the sky, landing in front of him and slamming him away with one mighty blow. Ben crashed into a rock formation and fell still. Ben! Shayera tried to rush to her friend's aid, but she was pinned by the fire coming from the two soldiers attacking her. Seeing that Ben was no longer a threat, Kreger marched towards her. You took Commander Talek from us, Shayera, and your friend, the Green One, did something to my mind, something bad. He looked down and thought as Shayera readied her mace. I miss Commander Talek. I miss being able to think without pain. His head snapped up. But no one's going to miss you. He pointed his arm at her, and it turned into a large cannon. Before he could fire, however, an orange-colored blur slammed into him, knocking him off balance. The other two soldiers scattered as bullets whizzed by their heads. You okay, Shayera? Asked Vixen, not taking her eyes off of Kreger. Shayera nodded. I'm all right, but Ben's down. Okay, I'll buy you some time to get him and Vig to safety. He's hurt too, by the way. Before Shayera could tell her no, Vixen called on the strength of the elephant and tackled the Thanagarian cyborg, slamming him into the other two soldiers, then jumped on top of him. With the elephant's strength also came its weight, so the aliens were pinned. I got this, go. Shayera, who had been checking Ben for a pulse, looked at her teammate in apprehension. I can't leave you behind. I'm right behind you, I'll ditch as soon as you guys are clear. Reluctantly, Shayera grabbed Vigilante and the still unconscious Ben and flew off. Vixen looked down at her captives, who were struggling to get out from under her. You're wasting your time, she said, not seeing one of Kreger's arms moving behind her. Right now, it's like an elephant is sitting on your she screamed in pain as Kreger struck her with an electricity-charged fist. As she fell to the ground, twitching, the Thanagarians got up. One pointed his rifle at her, intending to finish her off. Vixen's eyes went wide, and she held up her hands. Wait! Wait! She yelled in a panicked voice. Don't shoot, please. The soldier sneered. I can't think of a good reason not to. Vixen stared up at them. Because I can give you Shayera whole. You still want her? Kreger pushed the soldier aside and picked Vixen up by her wrists. I'm supposed to believe you would give me your teammate? Ha! I'm brain damaged, not stupid. Vixen glared at him. My animal senses are 100 times more acute than yours, I can find her with ease. One of the soldiers scoffed. And why would you want to? You mean besides saving myself? Vixen had to give a good reason, and fast. Shayera and I, we want the same man. While that wasn't necessarily untrue, she had done some thinking about her and Green Lantern. She'd recently come to accept that there wasn't going to be anything between them. Still, she added a little heartbreak to her voice, trying to sell it. Enough of this, said one of the soldiers, clearly not buying it as he raised his rifle. Wait, barked Kreger. I believe her. He dropped Vixen, who landed with a pained grunt. Lead the way. Vixen tried to rise but fell back down, groaning and clutching her ankle. Any of you got a med kit? The two soldiers looked at each other. We've got an analgesic projective back in the ship, said one, after you help us. Vixen glared at him. If you want me in condition to track someone over this terrain, you'll take me to it right now. Do it. Kreger ordered. The soldiers looked at him incredulously but still obeyed. One picked Vixen up and flew towards their ship, the other soldier and Kreger not far behind. After a few minutes, they reached the horseshoe-shaped craft, which had clearly seen better days. It was battered and scratched, lending further credence to Paran Dul's story that the Thanagarian Empire really had fallen, and it wasn't fabricated merely to hurt Shayera. Kreger waited outside while the soldiers took Vixen to the med bay and placed her on a table. One held out a bronze rod and knelt by her feet. This will kill the pain, he said, as Vixen smirked. Before he could ask what she was smiling about, Vixen kicked him across the room with her suddenly uninjured leg and into the other Thanagarian, knocking them both out. She slipped the rod back into the unconscious soldier's hand. You'll be needing that when you wake up. Vixen rushed to the cockpit and looked over the controls. The design of the new javelins had been based on configurations seen in Thanagarian ships, so she was able to deduce where the communication systems were. On top of that, she recognized the same frequency used by the watchtower. John, it's Vixen, can you hear me? Over. For a moment, all she got was static. Then she heard a familiar voice. Barely. Increase your HM gain. Over. Vixen did so, then began to explain. We've been ambushed by a bunch of Thanagarians who have a serious mat-on for Shayera. Over. She didn't get a response. John? John? Then she heard the cocking of a gun. Paran Dul stood behind her, a pistol aimed at her head and a fistful of wires, all that remained of the communication systems, in her free hand. I don't think he heard you, human. Outside in the jungle, Shayera paced, waiting for her teammates' return. Vigilante rested next to a large pond while Ben was still unconscious. Shayera had found that he had a minor concussion. She's taking too long, Shayera growled. I'm going back for her. The only reason she ain't back, said Vigilante, is the Hawks got her. You already know that, so where are you really going? Shayera's back straightened. I'm going to turn myself in, maybe they'll let her go if I give them what they want. Vigilante stood up. Dagnabbit, girl. I ain't gonna allow it. I thought that Ben gotten you out of that self-pity thing. Shayera narrowed her eyes. I'm not doing this because it's what I deserve, I'm doing this because I can't see any other way to get Vixen back alive. Then she raised an eyebrow. And you're not really in a position to stop me, are you, cowboy? Wordlessly, Vigilante pulled out one of his pistols. Shayera put one hand on her hip and twirled her mace with the other. Oh, please. With a defeated sigh, Vigilante put his gun away. Shayera put a hand on his shoulder. The Justice League is bound to send a search party in a day or two. Keep an eye on Ben, stay safe. Vigilante stared after her as she flew off. Via con Dios, he whispered. As she disappeared, he heard a groan behind him and saw Ben sit up. You okay, partner? Ben rubbed his head for a moment. What happened? He looked around. Where are Vixen and Shayera? Vigilante sighed. Vix got caught by the Hawks. Now, the boss lady is given herself up to save her. Seeing Ben's outraged look, he continued. Neither of us was in any shape to help. Now it was Ben's turn to sigh. So, now what do we do? Well, the way I figure, them Thanagarians are gonna look for us, no matter what Shayera does. I say, we get ready. An hour later, a lone Thanagarian soldier found Vigilante kneeling at the pond, using the water to clean his face. The cowboy heard the alien's footsteps and spoke without turning. Appears that you've got the drop on me, partner. Before the soldier could fire, a long vine wrapped itself around his leg and lifted him into the air, turning him around to see the face of Wildvine. In surprise, he dropped his rifle. Several more vines wrapped around his body, preventing him from struggling. May have spoken prematurely on that, said Vigilante, walking up to the bound Thanagarian, twirling his pistol. Now, you, me and my green friend here are gonna have a little confab concerning the location of your spaceship. Shayera found herself facing Dull, all of her soldiers, and Kreger, who held Vixen by her skull, his claw the only thing keeping her from falling. This wouldn't have been so bad, except that everyone present was flying over 100 feet in the air. Would you care to surrender now? Asked Dull, her tone suggesting that she already knew Shayera's answer. Or shall I have Kreger do something unseemly to your friend? Shayera glared. Let her go and I'm yours, no tricks. Dull smiled. I'm sure, drop your mace and we have a deal. Shayera glanced around as the soldiers surrounded her. She could probably take them, but there was no way that she would willingly put a teammate's life in jeopardy. She lifted her mace, showing it to all, and then dropped it to the jungle below. Two soldiers flew towards her and grabbed her arms, while Kreger developed a sadistic grin. He then let go of Vixen, and everyone watched as she fell, screaming. No! Shayera struggled against her captors but knew that even if she did get free, there was no way to catch up to the falling Vixen in time. Dull smirked, but her mood changed to confusion when she saw the Thanagarian's vessel moving to intercept the plummeting heroine. Who's flying my ship? She demanded, but she had no time to do more than that. She raised her shield and deflected a pair of neuroshock beams, courtesy of Jet Ray. The red alien then flew off to attack Kreger. Inside the Thanagarian ship, Vigilante was struggling to keep the ship on a steady intercept course. Concerned, dang busted, horse thievin', alien control panel, which can't nobody work properly. At the last second, he got the ship under control and moved under Vixen. I'm comin', darlin'. Just before Vixen hit the trees, her claws caught onto the roof of the ship, which pulled up just in time. Vixen smiled when she heard Vigilante's voice. Wh. With the soldiers distracted, Shayera slipped out of her captor's hold, punching and kicking any who tried to come near her. While she wasn't defenseless without her mace, she would definitely be kept busy for a while. Jet Ray smiled at Kreger. What'd say, ugly? Wanna go for round 3? Kreger only snarled and headed for the jungle floor. Jet Ray followed, slapping the Ultimatrix dial as soon as he hit the ground. After the flash of green light faded, a humanoid bird stood tall. It had brown and beige feathers, with a white mohawk sitting on top of its head, rising over a green mask. A green harness, arm guards and shin guards adorned his body but didn't conceal his large elbow blade nor the large talons on his hands and feet. Kickin' Hawk. Kreger growled. What sort of abomination is that? Kickin' Hawk smiled, which was odd, considering he had a beak. Hey, one flightless bird should fight another. He gestured to Kreger, whose wings had to be removed in order to fit him inside the exoskeleton. Kreger roared and rushed forward. Kickin' Hawk easily leapt over the cyborg and punched his back, creating a sizable dent. Kreger swung his own fist in a wide arc, but Kickin' Hawk ducked, then kicked upwards, knocking Kreger into the air. Before his opponent could hit the ground, Kickin' Hawk jumped into the air and kicked him into the ground, creating a large crater. Sparks began to fly out of the exoskeleton as Kreger struggled to his feet. You and Shayera took everything from me. He charged forward, wildly swinging his fists. Destroy you. Destroy you. Kickin' Hawk dodged most of the blows, but one managed to connect, sending him falling into a bush. He sat up, rubbing his sore chest, when his hand felt something metal. He picked up the object and smiled. Kreger stomped towards him but was suddenly hit by something metallic that left another dent in his chassis. He snarled as he saw Kickin' Hawk idly twirling Shayera's mace. Look what I found, Kickin' Hawk grinned. Think Shayera will mind if I use this on an oversized piñata like you? Before Kreger could respond, Kickin' Hawk shot forward, using everything at his disposal. His claws, talons, elbow blades and Shayera's mace left huge gashes and dents in his metal body. After a few minutes, he was defeated, his exoskeleton limbless and non-functioning. As a final insult, Kickin' Hawk lightly tapped Kreger's head with the mace, knocking him out. Vixen crawled her way to the ship's doors and pried them open. She was about to walk in when a white-garbed blur slammed into her, both of them falling inside. The impact rocked the ship. Vigilante glanced behind him to see Vixen battling Piran Dull. You folks mind? He yelled. Doomed driver up here. Piran Dull grabbed Vixen by the throat and slammed her against a wall, then extended 3 metal claws from her gauntlet. Vixen ducked just before the claws punched at least an inch into the ship's hull. She kicked her alien opponent away, then charged. A few punches and kicks later, and Dull was left clinging to the doorframe, barely conscious. Vixen finished the fight with a roundhouse kick that sent Dull hurtling out of the ship and towards the jungle floor. Vixen walked up to the cockpit. Vigilante looked at her and tipped his hat. You okay? Vixen smiled. I will be, if you let me drive. Then she gave Vigilante a quick kiss on the cheek. Thanks for the save, cowboy. Vigilante only blushed. Shayera finished the last of her opponents with a haymaker, then took a deep breath. She hadn't had to fight trained soldiers like that in a while, and she was tired. She was going to try to find Ben, but needn't have bothered. She saw Big Chill flying up to her, holding. I think you dropped this, Big Chill said, tossing the mace to her. Try not to lose your stuff, okay? Shayera smiled, but before she could reply, the commandeered vessel hovered up to them. The ramp opened up, revealing Vixen. You two need a lift? Watchtower. Several hours later, the Thanagarian vessel arrived at the Justice League space station. Ben used the Ultimatrix to tell the League what had happened, and they were assured that the Green Lantern Corps would send a team to arrest the Thanagarians that they'd left behind. As soon as the ship landed, a large group of Leaguers, as well as a medical team, marched forward. Vigilante was put on a stretcher, with Vixen right by his side. Both Ben and Shayera had noticed how close Vixen had stayed to the cowboy throughout the return trip. It looked like another couple had been made in the League. As they watched Vigilante and Vixen leave, Green Lantern ran up to them. Are you all right? Though he looked like he was directing the question to both of them, Ben knew that John was more concerned about his girlfriend. Ben didn't take offense. I'm fine, John, really. Shayera gave John a sincere smile. I just got a bad reunion, that's all. Green Lantern sighed in relief. You want to talk about it over dinner? Shayera linked her arm through his as they walked away, nodded, and then she turned her head. "Hey Ben." Ben had begun to walk away to his own quarters when Shayera's voice reached him. "Yeah? Thanks for what you said back there, I guess I needed it." Ben shrugged. "Sometimes, you need the obvious explained to you, but you're welcome anyway. I meant what I said. You're one of us, and nothing will change that." Chapter 18, Lines in the Sand. Metropolis. A supervillain stood on top of a building, energy crackling around his hands and his green bodysuit. He looked at the terrified people below in contempt. "Here is where I make my stand," he yelled. "Here is where I shall carve out the kingdom I am destined for." He smashed his hands against the roof of the building and, with a roar, ripped a chunk of it into the air. "Bow before the power of Mantis." He hurled the debris at the people below, intending to crush them all. Before the debris could strike the citizens, a bolt of blue energy vaporized it. Mantis looked around for whoever dared to interfere. When he saw who it was, his eyes widened. It was Superman, Astrodactyl, and Captain Atom, the latter of whom had fired the blast. "Is it just me?" Captain Atom asked, "or are the world conquerors getting mouthier?" "He's from Apocalypse," explained Superman, "they're all pretty chatty there." "Really?" said Astrodactyl. "Maybe all the supervillains from my universe came from there too, since none of them would ever shut up." Mantis sent another bolt of energy at the heroes, hitting Captain Atom dead on and freezing him solid. As Astrodactyl and Superman flew back down to catch him before he hit the ground, he had to marvel at the stuff that came from Apocalypse. The technology and the powers of its metahumans were all crazy. He'd once tried to figure out a piece of tech from the planet with gray matter, and even then, all he got was a headache. Batman later warned him not to try to think about it too hard, or he'd go insane. Superman managed to catch Captain Atom in time, but before he or Astrodactyl could think about thawing him out, Mantis tackled Superman through the side of a building. While the Apocalyptan was busy with the Kryptonian, Astrodactyl slapped the Ultimatrix dial. Swampfire. Swampfire sent a wave of fire over the ice, confident that Captain Atom would be fine. After all, it took the power of a giant, nuclear-powered robot to break his suit the last time, so a little fire wouldn't do much, if anything. After a few seconds, the ice was melted enough for Captain Atom to break out with his own strength. "Thanks for that," he said. "Now where's Superman?" Swampfire jerked his thumb to where bolts of energy were flying. "3 guesses where, and the first 2 don't count." "Got it," said Captain Atom, "I'll go back him up." "I'll be right behind you," said Swampfire. "It's time to go ultimate." He twisted the dial, then slapped it. Ultimate Swampfire. He looked at Captain Atom. "Okay, let's go." The two ran, or in Captain Atom's case, flew, to Superman's location, where they found their friend on the ropes. Whatever energy Mantis was hitting him with must have had magical properties, or energy blasts from Apocalypse metahumans ignored Kryptonian invulnerability, because the bolts were actually hurting him. "Bow down before you're better, Man of Steel." Mantis gloated before 2 blasts, one of nuclear energy and the other of incredibly powerful flames, sent him flying into the subway. Ultimate Swampfire looked at Superman in concern. "You okay?" Superman nodded. "Just needed a second, let's get him." "What's the story on this guy?" asked Captain Atom as they made their way into the subway. "There's a civil war on his home planet," explained Superman. "Guess he thought things would be easier here." Captain Atom smirked. "Bad call." Ultimate Swampfire nodded. "Yeah, no kidding." As they moved into the confined space, Ultimate Swampfire realized that his enhanced powers would do as much damage to his friends, as well as Mantis, so he slapped the Ultimatrix dial, turning back into Swampfire, then slapped it again. Fast track. This alien was about Ben's height, with a humanoid body, blue fur and a vaguely feline face. The 3 heroes found Mantis using the electricity from the 3rd rail to charge up his own powers. A bolt of energy sent Captain Atom flying, while Fast Track rushed forward in a blur of motion. He sent a barrage of super-fast punches into Mantis' face, and while they didn't do much damage on their own, they began to add up. "Captain Atom?" Superman called out to his teammate, who was on his knees. "I'm okay," he said. "It'll just take me a second to adjust to the energy." True enough, he stood up a moment later, looking more angry than anything else. He sent a huge blast of nuclear power at Mantis, with Fast Track barely dodging in time. Before Mantis could get up from that, Superman flew at him, punching him a few times, then pressing a button on the gray box on Mantis' belt. In a boom reminiscent of thunder, a white, swirling tunnel appeared behind him. Both Fast Track and Captain Atom had to brace themselves for a moment. It felt like they were being pulled in. "What in Sam Hill is that?" asked Captain Atom. "A boom tube," explained Superman, after headbutting Mantis, an extra-dimensional doorway back to Apocalypse. "Got it," said Captain Atom, "now duck." Superman did so, just as Captain Atom sent a bolt of energy into Mantis, sending him hurtling into the portal. After a few more seconds, the portal closed. "Nice work, you two." Superman looked satisfied. "Thanks," said Captain Atom, "but what's stopping him from coming right back?" "You mean, besides this?" Fast Track held out the boom tube generator in his hand. "I swiped it off of his belt right before you hit him." Captain Atom looked impressed. "That was only about a second of time to react." Fast Track shrugged. "I'm not called Fast Track for nothing." He handed the generator to Superman, who crushed it effortlessly. "Superman," the three heroes turned to see Lois Lane jump over some debris and rush towards them. "Lois Lane, Daily Planet." Superman smiled. "Yeah, Lois, I know." Lois smiled right back. "Would you care to comment on what just happened here?" "I'd like an interview, one-on-one." Fast Track and Captain Atom glanced at each other, knowing smiles on their faces. "I'm pretty sure there's something we have to do someplace," Captain Atom said, "right, Fast Track?" The blue alien nodded, and they left, leaving the other alien with the reporter. After they were gone, Lois turned to Superman. "You're late." Superman grinned. "I was busy." "Like I wasn't?" Lois looked down at her notepad. "But I've already written the story up and filed it, so now that we're both off the clock." Without a word, Superman picked her up bridal style and flew up through a hole, created during the battle, and off for their date. Outside, Captain Atom and Fast Track said their farewells. Fast Track zoomed off, but before Captain Atom did the same, he heard a voice calling him. "Captain Adams." Atom looked down to see General Eiling standing next to a car. "Captain Nathaniel Adams." Captain Atom flew down to talk to him. "General Eiling, sir, what brings you?" He trailed off as the general handed him a file. "What's this?" "Orders." Eiling gave him a hard stare. "Your commission has been reactivated. You're back in the Air Force." Captain Atom looked uneasy. "I'm committed to the Justice League now, sir." "You also made a commitment to the service, Captain." Eiling didn't even blink. "Seems to me, you've got a decision to make." Unknown location inside an office building, the question was finding it hard to concentrate on downloading the file he'd found. He was slightly nervous. It wasn't the first government lair he'd broken into, but the stakes had never been this high. On top of that, there was the annoying sound of fists hitting flesh in the background, though that was only because his girlfriend, Huntress, was watching his back. The ex-leaguer in question kicked another security guard in the solar plexus and sent him flying. She wore a purple, skin-tight outfit with thigh-high boots, long gloves, and a long cape. Attached to her belt was an array of weapons and gadgets. "You really know how to show a girl a good time, Q." Her voice had a little more than its usual amount of annoyance as she drove her elbow into another guard's face. "When are we going out on a real date?" Question finally had enough. "Sure." Trying to concentrate. "I'm not even in the Justice League anymore," Huntress commented as she knocked another man out with a chair. "You're lucky to have me along." "Hardly," Question retorted, "you're drawn to my eccentric charm." Huntress took down another guard with a flying double kick, just as the file finished downloading. Question pulled out the flash drive. Finished. Huntress dusted off her hands. Me, too. Not quite. Question ripped the computer monitor out of the wall and threw it into the head of the last guard, who tried to sneak up on Huntress. You get what you came for? Asked a curious Huntress. Question had never actually told her what he'd been after here, only that it was important. I believe so. Question held up the flash drive. If there's a link between Luthor and Cadmus, I'll find it here. Huntress smiled coyly. Which leaves the rest of our evening tantalizingly free. There are 3 terabytes of data here, Question protested. I'll be busy for days. Huntress swiped the flash drive out of his hand and glared at him. Question sighed. Dinner and a movie? It's a start, Huntress said while tucking the drive away in her belt. At Cadmus headquarters, Lex Luthor was getting a checkup from Professor Hamilton. One of the many benefits of working with Cadmus was that he received medical care that not even he knew existed yet. Take off your chest plate. Hamilton ordered. You don't need it. Then, he pressed a button on the vest's shoulder, allowing it to fall apart into 2 pieces. Luthor looked at him in shock. The metal vest he wore was the only thing preventing his kryptonite cancer from spreading. What are you doing? He demanded, even as he tried to put the vest back on. I'll die without this. The cancer. It's gone, Lex, Hamilton explained. You're in remission. No, that's not accurate. There's no trace of the disease, as if it were never there. That's preposterous. Luthor normally didn't believe in hope, but he suddenly felt the embers of it stirring within him. You've got the body of a 20-year-old, continued Hamilton, and you don't have cancer. How? I don't know, admitted Hamilton. It might have been the vest. It might be an unexpected effect of the kryptonite poisoning that gave you the disease in the first place. I'll continue to study the... He trailed off as Amanda Waller walked into the room. I'm in the middle of my physical, Mrs. Waller. Luthor was slightly annoyed. He wanted to know what was going on with his body. You might be in the middle of a hornet's nest. Waller replied, Question and Huntress have copied files from a high-security Cadmus terminal. Luthor's eyebrows went up in alarm. What did they get? Tech support can't tell for certain. A rare expression of worry crossed Waller's face. Maybe everything. Luthor turned around and put his hands on the table. He took a deep breath. For all our sakes, we'd better hope that the encryption on those files is as good as we've been told. The Question's apartment. The Question's anticipation was rising. He'd spent months hunting down Cadmus secrets, and now he was going to blow them wide open. If his face were visible, one would have seen a Cheshire smile on his face when the files he'd stolen were finally decrypted on his computer. Finally, he thought, the connection between Cadmus and Luthor. Looking over the files, he found something particularly interesting. A file labeled President Luthor. Selecting that, he found another file, titled Oval Office. A red glow was reflected on his face, coming from the image on his screen. The Question was horrified. Oh, no, no, no. Several days later saw the haggard, unkempt form of the Question staring at a board that showed all of the connections he'd made over the years. It's all connected. He mumbled to himself, not alternate reality, time loop. Luthor becomes president. Flash is killed. Superman kills Luthor in retaliation. Superhuman arms race. Armageddon, the end of the world, inevitable. With a savage grunt, he put his fist through his board. Is the future immutable? He cried out. Can destiny be changed? Will they allow it? He didn't react to, or didn't hear, the sound of the lock to his door being picked, nor to the presence of Huntress storming in. Screening your calls, she yelled. You haven't answered the phone in days. She took a whiff of the apartment. Ugh, it's rank in here. Is that you? Have to try. Question muttered, oblivious to Huntress. Alternative unthinkable. Q. Huntress walked up to him and put a hand on his shoulder, which seemed to snap him out of it. "Are you all right? Have to go?" Question ran to the door, grabbing his hat along the way. "Can't let it happen again." At first, Huntress wanted to run after him, but then she noticed a video that had been paused on the computer. It showed Superman standing in front of the president's desk in the White House, with Lex Luthor standing behind it. She pressed the play button. "There are at least 6 different ways I could stop you right now," said Superman. "But they all involve lethal force, don't they?" Luthor sneered, "And you don't do that." "No, you need me. You wouldn't be much of a hero without a villain, and you do love being a hero, don't you? The cheering children, the swooning women. You love it so much, it's made you my most reliable accomplice." Superman reeled back. "Accomplice? What are you?" "You could have crushed me any time you wanted," Luthor interrupted, "and it wasn't the law or the will of the people that stopped you. It was your ego. Being a hero was too important to you. You're as responsible for this as I am. So go ahead, fix it somehow, put me on trial, lock me up, but I'll beat it. And then we'll start the whole thing all over again." Superman glared at his enemy. "I did love being a hero, but if this is where it leads, I'm done with it." Superman's eyes glowed red. "Oh my God," whispered Huntress. "Watchtower technology always improves, and if the Justice League wanted to stay on top of the game, they had to upgrade, just like everyone else." Superman was holding up a massive piece of machinery, while Ship used his powers to make the new computers being installed even better. It paid to have a galvanic mechamorph aboard the station. "Ship, called Ship. He says just a few more minutes, Superman." Translated Ben, as he stood nearby. He was still one of the only people who could understand the little alien. "It's okay," said Superman, "I can do this all day, not that I want to." Both he and Ben noticed Question walk into the room. Ben recoiled when he caught the faceless man's scent. "Dude, when was the last time you showered?" Question ignored him as he marched right up to Superman. "Something I can help you with?" the Kryptonian asked. "I hope so," Question replied, "but I assume you don't want to discuss your White House weenie roast in front of a crowd." He tilted his head towards Ben and the handful of other leaguers in the room. Superman's eyes widened. He lowered the machine to the ground and led Question away. "I'll be back in a few minutes." As they walked off, Ship turned to Ben. "Ship?" Ben shrugged. "I don't know, buddy, but I'll tell you what, I have a bad feeling about it all. There was one room on the Watchtower that was strictly for the founding members of the League. Not even Ben was allowed in. Now, Superman opened the door with the Question in tow. The conspiracy buff looked around. "Always wondered what was in here," he commented, "a private conference room. Original members only, yes." He sat down in one of the chairs. "A place where you're free to discuss your secrets and lies." Superman glared at him. "You said something about me in the White House." "Not you, exactly," explained Question, "but another version of you, "Stop dancing around it," growled Superman, "tell me what you know." "I know what you told everyone," said Question, then continued in a mocking tone, "The Justice Lords, a parallel version of the Justice League, came to our world to rid it of crime just as they did on their own Earth. With Lex Luthor's help, our Justice League managed to rout them before they could impose their totalitarian will on our populace." Question's back straightened, and he looked Superman in the eye. "I also know what you didn't tell anyone, outside of the original 7 members of the Justice League. Not even your own cousin and your friend Ben, and Ben is supposed to know everything that you 7 do. On that other Earth, so very much like our own, a Superman, so very much like you, killed the president." Superman's hand reflexively tightened around the edge of the table, crushing it to powder. Question, "No one can know about this." "Or what?" demanded Question. "You'll incinerate me, too?" Superman looked offended. "I'd never do anything like that." "Wouldn't you?" Question looked mocking, even without a face. "Didn't you try to lobotomize Doomsday with your heat vision, just like the Justice Lord did?" That's different. It's the same. The question seemed to be getting more and more agitated. A heavily armed watchtower with an army of proactive heroes, Luthor running for president. If it's not quite the same, it soon will be. Have you seen Amanda Waller's computer simulations? Batman told me about them. Superman now had a feeling of where Question was going now. Did he tell you all the models predict that a war between the Justice League and the government will devastate the planet? We would never fight the government. Superman protested. The Question stood up. Not even if Luthor was the government. Superman only stared at him. After a moment, Question sagged, then turned to leave. Predestined. Flash will die, you will kill Luthor. Armageddon is inevitable. Question, Superman put his hand on the other man's shoulder, but he jerked out of his grasp with a gasp of fear. I'm worried about you. You're mixed up, this world isn't like the other one. We're not the Justice Lords, those things you're afraid of will never happen here. I won't let them. Question didn't reply, he only walked out. LexCorp, Metropolis. Lex Luthor strode into his office, checking a few papers that had been sent up by his science division. He almost didn't notice the Question sitting in his chair until he turned it around to face him. The Question, isn't it? Luthor didn't appear worried. I believe you took something that belongs to me. Have you seen the latest polls? The Question tossed a newspaper onto the desk. It's beginning to look like you're going to be our next president, just like in that other world. Luthor sat on the edge of the desk and smiled. I wouldn't bet against me. No, agreed Question, it wouldn't be prudent. He leaned forward. I want you to understand something, Luthor. Although my distaste for you as a human being is Brobdingnagian, what I'm about to do isn't personal. What are you babbling about? Asked Luthor, though his expression said that he already knew. Everything that exists has a specific nature. Each entity exists as something in particular and has characteristics that are a part of what it is. He began to pull off his tie. Is a, and no matter what reality he calls home, Luthor is Luthor. He stood up and walked around the desk and faced Luthor. If I'm to save the world, your existence must come to an end before you take office. The Question was somewhat surprised when Luthor only laughed. You're going to kill me so that Superman can't. Question shrugged. I'm a well-known crackpot. The Justice League's reputation will survive my actions, and Superman's legacy will remain intact. Interesting plan. Luthor said, unfortunately for you, it's not really an option. As Question moved in to strangle him, Luthor swung his fist. The impact sent the hero flying across the room and into the side of the enormous aquarium that Luthor had installed. As he lay there, moaning, the Question tried to figure out what had happened. Luthor had struck with the same force as Humongosaur. How had he done it? He struggled to his feet. President? Luthor shook his head as he walked up to Question. Foolish, faceless man, my campaign is a farce. A small part of a much grander scheme. Question threw a punch, one that was easily dodged. Luthor grabbed his arm and threw him again, this time on top of the desk, which shattered from the impact. President? Luthor said again, do you know how much power I'd have to give up to be president? Even though he couldn't see his face, Luthor could almost see the wheels turning in Question's mind. That's right, conspiracy buff. I spent $75 million on a fake presidential campaign, all just to tick Superman off. He punched Question in the face, then the gut. As he coughed, Luthor leaned in close. Now, about those files you stole from me. Metropolis. 1 week later, Superman was on patrol, lost in thought, when he heard a familiar voice. Hey, Boy Scout. Jet Ray flew up beside him. I was wondering where you were after Question left last week. I had to have John look for you telepathically. Superman sighed. Sorry, Ben, I've just had a lot on my mind. Jet Ray nodded in sympathy. Yeah, between Luthor running for president, the League getting flack for looking like an army, and your relationship with Lois. Jet Ray's face became quizzical. How is that going, anyway? Have you told her yet? Ben had been bugging Superman to tell Lois his secret identity for months. It had become a bit of a running joke between them. Superman was about to respond when he heard one of the special signal watches he'd built go off. It transmitted at an ultra-high frequency that only he could hear. In all of Metropolis, only 2 people had one, and Lois was off on an assignment in Central City, so that meant. Jimmy. Huh? Asked a confused Jet Ray. No time, said Superman. Let's go. Superman followed the sound, with Jet Ray right behind him. They landed on top of a building, where Jet Ray turned into Heat Blast. Jimmy, called out Superman. Not exactly. From behind part of a wall, an arm extended, holding a watch. The owner of the arm came around the corner, revealing Huntress. Some kind of hypersonic signal, right? She tapped the face of the watch. Keeps good time, too. Heat Blast was wary of Huntress. He'd only worked with her a couple of times, and she'd been brutal enough to make Wrath proud. It was only one of the reasons that she had been thrown out of the League, a willingness to murder being another. Superman disappeared in a blur, yanking the watch out of Huntress' hand. What do you think you're doing? Your little pal is fine. Huntress gestured to her side, and both aliens saw Jimmy Olsen taped to a chair and gagged. I was just trying to get your attention. You guys need a hotline. Jimmy made some angry, unintelligible noises from behind the gag. In a moment, Jimmy. Superman turned back to Huntress. This better be good. She got to the point. Question's been missing for almost a week. This isn't the first time Question's dropped off the radar, commented Heat Blast. Don't you remember when he disappeared for 10 days, and then we found out that he was trying to dig up a UFO supposedly buried under the Hollywood sign? Huntress shook her head. Just before he disappeared, he was behaving oddly, well, oddly for him. He saw a fake tape of you, Superman, killing Lex Luthor, then he freaked out and ran off. Heat Blast turned to Superman, not knowing why the Man of Steel's face had suddenly gone very pale. Superman reached for his communicator. Question, this is Superman, come in, please. He looked at Huntress and Heat Blast. Channel's open, but he's not responding. John should be able to track his location. After freeing Jimmy, Superman explained to John what he needed, and the 3 heroes were led to a junkyard on the outskirts of Metropolis. Along the way, Huntress explained how she and Question had raided a Cadmus outpost in order to steal the information. Once at the coordinates John provided, they found Question's communicator. That's never a good sign, thought Heat Blast. Huntress had started to panic the moment she saw the communicator. She started to dig through a pile of trash, looking for Question. I'll find you, baby. Huntress was nearing hysterics. Superman put a hand on her shoulder. Not here, you won't. Huntress looked up at him, then to Heat Blast as he took up the conversation. Yeah, they wouldn't have bothered to just dump his communicator unless they took him alive. It has to be Cadmus, growled Huntress, but if they've got him, we'll never find him. Sure we will, said Superman. After all, we've been keeping tabs on Cadmus for months. We know exactly where they are. Heat Blast nodded. It had been difficult, but between Batman, Superman, Question, and Gray Matter, they'd finally discovered Cadmus HQ. It made everyone in the League feel a little better, now that they knew where the people who wanted to destroy them worked from. Huntress, however, was not happy. And you didn't do anything. Superman crossed his arms. The Justice League plays by the rules. We'll move when we have solid evidence, not before, and we'll move within the limits of the law. That's why I quit, Huntress huffed, turning her back. Not to nitpick, said Heat Blast, but weren't you fired? Huntress spun around and glared at him, but he continued. But she may have a point, Superman. Cadmus crossed a line when they kidnapped one of our own. At the very least, we need to get Question back. Superman clearly wasn't happy, but he didn't have any other options. All right, fine, the 3 of us will do this, and we'll do it off the books. Cadmus headquarters, New Mexico. Since Ben, Superman and Huntress were going to attack Cadmus without anyone else's support or knowledge, they had to take the long way instead of teleporting. The front of Cadmus HQ looked like an abandoned factory, which the three heroes waited outside of for a few minutes to let the Ultimatrix recharge. "Are you ready yet?" asked an impatient Huntress. Ben nodded. "It's hero time." He slammed down on the dial, and the familiar green light flashed. Beetle. In front of them stood a large, humanoid beetle with a green and gray exoskeleton. A massive horn rose from his head, which had large, powerful-looking jaws. "Oh, come on," he yelled, looking at the Ultimatrix dial on his chest. "I wanted Lodestar." "Is this going to be a problem?" asked Superman. "No," said Beetle, "I can work with this." "All right then," said Superman, as Huntress readied a bow staff, "let's go." Inside Cadmus HQ, alarms were blaring. Soldiers ran to their assigned stations, and scientists locked down their labs. At the front entrance, a dozen of Cadmus' best troops stood with rifles aimed at the door. Though the door was over a foot thick of solid steel, it crumpled after only 2 punches from Superman. As soon as he stepped over the threshold, the soldiers opened fire. Beetle stood in front of Huntress, while bullets ricocheted off of the Man of Steel. "We're past the lead shielding," Superman shouted over the sound of gunfire. "I should be able to find question with my X-ray vision, hold on." With a quick burst of heat vision, Superman melted the soldiers' weapons. "I didn't want either of you to get hit by a ricochet." "Not a problem for me," said Beetle. "I've taken a lot worse than bullets." "Well, unlike you," said Huntress, "I'm not bulletproof." "Are you always this angry?" asked Beetle, "because if you are, I have no idea how Question didn't go nuttier than he already is." While they were talking, the soldiers dogpiled onto Superman, who sent them flying with a single shrug of his shoulders. He gestured for Huntress and Beetle to attack while he scanned the area. Huntress fought like a demon, attacking relentlessly until the soldiers were down. Beetle showed a little more restraint but wasn't above tackling 2 or 3 soldiers at a time into a wall. Another squad of troops arrived, so Beetle ripped a chunk of the wall off and shoved it into his mouth. "Now isn't the time for a snack," Huntress yelled as she elbow-dropped another soldier. "For me, it is." The tip of Beetle's horn glowed green, then a blast of energy ripped forth, knocking the entire squad out. While they were fighting, Superman saw a familiar face in a locked-down lab. "Hold the fort, I've got some personal business." Before either of his teammates could say anything, he crashed through the walls to his target. "Hey," Huntress said sarcastically, "take your time." "Yeah," called an equally sarcastic Beetle, "it's not like we're busy fighting for our lives or anything." If the front door to Cadmus hadn't stopped Superman, then the door to Emil Hamilton's office would have been less than nothing. Superman marched up to his former friend. "A lot of things are starting to make sense now, Professor Hamilton." He glared at the aging scientist. "When did Cadmus recruit you?" Hamilton seemed only mildly surprised to see one of the most powerful beings on Earth ready to crush him into paste. "Recruit me?" he asked. "I went to them." "How can you work for these people?" Superman demanded, "Do you know what they are?" Hamilton shrugged. "Power brokers, politicians, criminals, and Black Ops mercenaries with one thing in common besides, they're humanity's last hope against your kind." "What are you talking about?" Superman couldn't see Hamilton's reasoning. "Humanity doesn't need protection from us." "I used to believe that." Hamilton somehow had the gall to look disappointed. "I thought you were a guardian angel, come to answer our prayers, but Lucifer was an angel too, wasn't he?" "Professor." "You forget," Hamilton interrupted, "I've been on the receiving end of your wrath when you brought Supergirl to STR labs for medical treatment. I know what you're capable of." "That's what this is about?" Superman couldn't believe this, all he'd done was shout. He hadn't hurt anyone then. "One little scare, and you betray us. You stole Kara's DNA, violated her trust, and my trust. The chicken or the egg, Superman?" Without another word, Superman turned around and left, leaving Hamilton to take a deep breath. He hadn't known how much longer he could keep his cool. Superman came back to see dozens of soldiers on the ground, either moaning or unconscious. Edel walked up to him. "Geez, Supes, did you stop for coffee or something?" Superman didn't respond, only turned and marched for where the question was being held. Superman kicked the door down, and Edel's eyes widened. Question was strapped to a table, with a dozen cables attached to his head and chest. Whatever was being done to him was awful, if the sadistic smile on the face of the other man in the room was anything to go on. At the sound of the door falling down, the man drew a pistol and aimed it at Superman. "Don't be stupid," the Kryptonian warned, "drop it." The torturer looked at Superman, then at the pistol, and let it fall to the floor. Huntress marched towards him. "Sorry," she said, her fist raised, "not good enough." And then she struck him with enough force to knock him across the room. She walked up to him, her crossbow pointed at his throat. "Huntress!" Superman called out as he unhooked Question from the table. "Don't do it," warned Edel, "he's not worth the arrow." For a second, it looked like Huntress would really do it, but then she put away her weapon and ran back to Question. "Lean on me," she said to her boyfriend, "we're getting out of here." Question only mumbled incoherently. "It's gonna be a little rough," said Superman before they left the room. "I'll take the guards, Ben, cover Huntress when she moves." Question. "That won't be necessary, Superman." All of the heroes, save for the semi-conscious Question, smiled at the familiar voice. It was Captain Atom, who had apparently followed them. "Good to see you, Captain," said Superman, "cover our flank." "I'm afraid you misunderstand," said Captain Atom, as the heroes began to move out. "I'm speaking as an officer of the United States Air Force." "Bad time to grow a sense of humor, Cap." Huntress suddenly wasn't so sure that Captain Atom was the cavalry. "No joke, ma'am," Captain Atom replied, "I'm currently assigned to General Eiling Special Projects Unit, and my orders are to prevent you from taking Question out of this facility." "Oh, come on," shouted Edel, shocked that one of his friends had betrayed them. "How can you work for these people, Captain?" "I'm a soldier, Ben," Captain Atom replied. "I do what I'm told." A red glow surrounded one of his hands. "So how's this gonna go down?" "This is ridiculous," said Superman, disgusted with his colleague. "If you're not going to help us, get out of the way." "Not going to happen, Superman," said Captain Atom as he put himself in their path. "I've got my orders, legal and proper." "Dude," said Edel, "Superman just told you to step aside." "I heard him, Ben." Captain Atom didn't even take his eyes off of Superman, and I'll say again, not going to happen. Superman moved to push him aside, but the nuclear hero smashed his fist, wreathed in red energy, into Superman's jaw, knocking him down the hallway. "I control radiation, Superman," stated Captain Atom, "that includes red sun radiation." Edel and Huntress, who held the injured Question, rushed over to Superman, who looked more annoyed than hurt. "Get Question out of here," he told them, "don't wait for me." "What made you think I was gonna?" asked Huntress. "You sure about this?" Edel asked, though his question was more if Superman wanted to fight one of his own teammates again, rather than if he needed help. Superman nodded. "Cover Huntress and Question and get out of here. This building is comm-shielded, so you can only call John for transport when you get outside. I'll be right behind you. Nobody's going anywhere with Question." Captain Atom marched towards them, while Superman moved to intercept him. "I thought I made that clear." He swung his fist again, but Superman dodged and then smashed him through several walls. Then it was just Edel, Huntress and Question. "I've had just about enough of Cadmus hospitality," said Edel. "What'd ya say we leave?" Huntress nodded. "My thoughts exactly." As they moved out, Question weakly raised his head. "You shouldn't have come for me. And you shouldn't have snuck away without me," Huntress retorted. They made their way to a wide room, but the way out of that was blocked by a massive door and a squad of Cadmus troops. Edel rushed headlong into them, knocking them down like bowling pins. Huntress took care of the last one, who'd managed to avoid Edel's charge. "What about the door?" asked Huntress. "I could just chew a hole through," offered Edel. Before Huntress could say anything, Superman and Captain Atom crashed through the wall above and behind them, then arced downward and through the door, creating a hole large enough to walk through, then continued fighting each other. "Or we could just let two League powerhouses do the work for us," said Edel. "Yeah," agreed Huntress, "why should we do the heavy lifting?" The three walked into another room, where they found that their exit was up 50 stories worth of stairs. Question moaned. "I'm not going to make it." "Sure you will," Huntress encouraged, then turned to Edel. "You got something that'll work?" "I hope so." Edel raised his hand to strike the Ultimatrix dial but then spoke to it. "If you turn me into Ripjaws, I'm selling you for scrap." He slapped the dial and disappeared in a flash of green light. Lodestar. Lodestar looked down at his magnet-like hands. "All right, now we're talking." He used his magnetic powers to pull a large sheet of metal loose and bring it towards them. "Everyone hop on." Lodestar magnetically levitated the metal, with himself, Huntress and Question aboard. As they rose, they saw Superman and Captain Atom flying all over the place, trading blows, energy blasts and heat vision. Lodestar wanted to help, but he knew Captain Atom. If he had orders, he'd stubbornly follow them. He'd gotten better at loosening up over the last year or so, but now it was like he was back to being the soldier that he was before he became living energy. As soon as they reached the roof, Lodestar activated his communicator. "John, it's Ben. Question and Huntress need to get out of here now. Huntress is no longer part of the Justice League. Save it." Lodestar shouted, "Question is down, and Cadmus troops are right behind us. As soon as we're clear, scan the area for Superman and Captain Atom. They should be out here soon." In a flash of light, the three disappeared. Watchtower. As soon as they got off the teleporter pad, a waiting medical team rushed Question to the infirmary, Huntress right behind them. Lodestar turned back into Ben, then explained what had happened to John and Flash, the only senior members of the League available. While those two debated on what to do, Ben made his way to the infirmary to check on Question. "Ben." Ben turned to see Supergirl flying towards him. "I heard you and Superman attacked Cadmus. What's going on?" Ben grabbed her hand and led her to the infirmary. "I'll explain on the way." As Ben told her everything he knew, they saw another medical team rush by, accompanied by Superman and a thoroughly beaten Captain Atom. The captain's containment suit was cracked and pitted, looking like it was about to completely fail. Ben felt guilty. Maybe Captain Atom wouldn't have been so badly hurt if he'd done something to help. Ben shook his head. There was too much going on as it was without him wondering about what might have been. Besides, Question had been in critical condition. There hadn't been any time to talk Captain Atom down. Ben and Supergirl made their way to the room with Question in it. Once all of the medics left, they saw Huntress take something out of Question's pocket and spray it on his face. She gently pulled, removing what looked like skin from Question's head, revealing a bruised, beaten face. Since the room was soundproofed, Ben and Supergirl couldn't hear what was being said, but whatever it was made Huntress smile and kiss the man. After a moment, she walked up to the wall and blacked out the window. "Do I really want to know what they're doing?" thought Ben. "Nah, probably not. I don't want to give myself nightmares." Putting certain mental images aside, he and Supergirl met up with Superman, who was observing a team of scientists as they tended to Captain Atom. "Did Cadmus really turn him against us?" Supergirl asked her cousin. She trusted Ben's word, of course, but she still had a hard time believing that one of her friends could work for those people. "They did," said Superman, not looking at either of them, "and it gets worse. Professor Hamilton is also working for them." The eyes of Ben and Supergirl went wide. "And he was probably the one who cloned me," finished Supergirl. "Why?" Superman got a dark look on his face. "He was afraid of us." Ben put a hand on Supergirl's shoulder. "I'm sorry, Kara." He was just as surprised, but Supergirl had known Hamilton for years, years of trust and friendship spat on. Supergirl clenched her fists. "Don't be, I'll feel better when we shut them down." "One stop first," said Superman. "Both of you wait here." As he left, Green Arrow walked up to the two younger heroes. "What's going on?" he asked. As Ben and Supergirl explained the situation to the Archer, Superman walked into the infirmary and found Huntress sitting on the side of Question's bed. "He's gonna be fine," she said, before Superman could say anything, "but he needs his rest." "I'll only be a moment," Superman assured her. Huntress looked ready to object when Question stopped her. "It's okay, Helena." Huntress nodded at him, then stood up to leave. "5 minutes," she said as she left the room. After she was gone, Superman walked up to Question. "What happened, Question? How did Cadmus get a hold of you?" "I went to kill Luthor," Question admitted, not even blinking, "so that you wouldn't be able to." "That's not how we do things," Superman said. "How do we do things, Superman?" With every word, Question's voice grew louder. "Your counterpart killed Luthor. This Luthor is scheming to enrage you." "And doing a pretty good job of it," muttered Superman. "Ruining your reputation," Question continued, as if Superman hadn't spoken, "turning your friends and comrades against you, creating a superpowered arms race, but you cannot succumb." Superman folded his arms. "I can shut down Cadmus without killing Luthor." A disappointed expression crossed Question's now visible face. "Carry on then. If you're wrong, it's not like it's the end of the world, right?" On the observation deck of the Watchtower, Green Arrow and Ben had joined Flash and John to discuss their next move. While Ship moved from computer to computer, updating software, Supergirl had remained behind to talk to her cousin. "What about tailing some of their employees?" suggested Flash. "I mean, Cadmus has to let people go home after a while, right?" John shook his head. "We've tried that avenue of approach. Cadmus has been using some method of getting its people to their homes and back again without us being able to detect them. And we can't just grab them and have you read their minds," mused Ben. "We're on thin enough ice already." "These guys have to slip up eventually," said Arrow, "and when they do, we'll find out what they have planned." The four tossed ideas around for a few more minutes until Superman and Supergirl came into the room. "Give me one good reason not to go down there again and take them out." Superman hadn't seemed this mad since his fight with Captain Marvel. "If you didn't know the answer," John replied, "you wouldn't have bothered to ask." "Don't handle me, John," Superman growled. "I'm serious. We don't have any hard evidence that they've committed any crimes." It was true, aside from what Question had taken, there wasn't any real proof that Cadmus was evil. "Oh, come on," Superman objected, "you know they're dirty." "Then maybe we should put more energy into proving it," said Green Arrow, "and less into acting like a bunch of hyperthyroid stormtroopers." Superman glared at him. "I don't remember asking you for your opinion." "No?" asked the Archer. "How about when you guys hijacked me up here against my will and made me join this team? Batman said I was supposed to keep you guys honest. Do I look like Batman to you?" "Actually," said Ben, "when you get all grouchy like that, you do." "We can't let Cadmus get away with this," said Superman. "Did I say we should?" replied Ben. "But we have to be smart about how we handle it." Ben was starting to get worried. While he hated Cadmus for what they'd done to the League, the Ultiman and his girlfriend, and while he remembered his ultimatum to Amanda Waller, he wasn't going to rush in, blindly calling for vengeance. He'd done that when he was younger, often with disastrous results. He wasn't so sure that other members of the League had learned his lessons, though. "Do you know what they did to me?" Supergirl asked Green Arrow. "Look, kid," the Archer said calmly, "Hamilton's a piece of garbage and Luthor is worse. But this isn't the way to stop them." John spoke up again. "We must also consider the possibility that Cadmus is right to be afraid of us." "What?" yelled an indignant Supergirl. The Martian continued with a slightly raised voice. "And there is strong evidence of Cadmus having legitimate connections to the government. Maybe, said Superman, to some rogue Black Ops group, the real government wouldn't get involved in anything like this. Hey! Everyone turned to Green Arrow. I'm the only guy in the room who doesn't have superpowers, or the ability to get them, and let me tell you, you guys scare me. What if you do decide to go marching down there, taking care of whoever you think is guilty? Who could stop you? Me? Supergirl gritted her teeth. So you want the government to have a bunch of superhuman weapons just to keep us in check? No, said Arrow uncertainly. I don't know. Yeah, the others looked hurt, while he took a deep breath, then continued. Look, I'm an old lefty. The government must do for people what people can't do for themselves. The people sure can't protect themselves from the likes of us. Superman lightly pinched the bridge of his nose. We're not talking about the government. We're talking about a shadow cabinet that's taken it upon themselves to eliminate us. They came after us, we have to hit them back hard. And even if we do go after Cadmus, said Ben, what'll happen next, huh? You think the world will just let us attack a part of the US government and get away scot-free? Flash coughed into his hand, getting their attention. Grammy, Flash always used to say that the trouble with an eye for an eye is that everybody ends up blind. LexCorp, Metropolis Lex Luthor did not normally want for resources, he had the bounties of entire countries at his beck and call. Still, even with all that, he didn't have the technology to build what he truly desired, that is, until Cadmus came along. It had taken months, but he had discreetly smuggled the advanced technology out of their laboratories and into his own. He was beginning the final stages of construction when the communicator began to beep. Only one person called him at this hour. He placed the device in his ear. What is it, Mrs. Waller? Superman broke into Cadmus, along with Huntress and the shapeshifter. Luthor had always been slightly irritated that Waller had never shared any of the heroes' secret identities. When they left, they took Question and Captain Atom with them. That was fast, mused Luthor. Still, opportunity knocks. What? Sorry, I'm working on something here, go on. As he spoke, Luthor made his way over to a computer. The continual security breaches are bad enough, but now the Question's back with the League, and we still don't know what he's learned. In a week of torture, Question had never said anything, Luthor had actually been impressed. What's the worst-case scenario? Luthor began to type as the screen showed a satellite image of Cadmus headquarters. If they've got enough to tie you to this, warned Waller, they'll head right for your doorstep. Let them come, Luthor said confidently. I've got a full pardon from the president. Not for any new crimes, Lex. If you get arrested, we'll disavow any knowledge of your actions. Well, that would be inconvenient, said Luthor, but I wouldn't worry about the Justice League just yet. They have problems of their own. Goodbye, Mrs. Waller. He hung up and pressed a final key. The computer showed a picture of the watchtower and read, engaged. The watchtower. No matter what the others said, Superman wouldn't budge from his position of retaliation against Cadmus. I still think we should go down to Cadmus, take them out, and accept any consequences after. Superman's words were cut short by the alarms that began blaring throughout the station. Computer, John barked, report. A synthesized voice began to speak as a large computer rose from the floor. Binary fusion generator initialization sequence in progress. The heroes stared in shock. The station was going to fire the fusion cannon. Abort, yelled the Martian. Unable to comply. System locked. John ran to the computer, typing furiously. Override. Command Authority 004. System Administrator John Johns recognized. Unable to comply. Ship, yelled Ben, interface with it. Shut it down if you can, slow it down if you can't. Ship, the symbiote leaped into the computer and merged with it. As he did so, Ben jumped off the platform and activated the Ultimatrix. Ghost Freak, the ghost-like alien phased through the hull of the station and into space, heading towards the bottom of the watchtower, where the cannon was located. He'd only have one chance to pull this off. John reached for the intercom. All hands, prepare for primary fusion discharge. This is not a drill. Ship did his best, slowing the buildup of energy long enough for Ghost Freak to get into position, directly in front of the cannon. I hope this works, he thought, then slapped the Ultimatrix dial. Feedback. This new alien was about 6 feet tall and had a pitch-black body with green on his chest. His fingertips looked like copper sockets, while a pair of long, thick antennae over his one-eyed head had copper plugs. The same plug was at the end of his long tail. Feedback felt a familiar rush. Ever since he'd unlocked this alien, he had felt different. Every one of his aliens had a different feel to them, but Feedback was special. He felt an overwhelming sense of confidence, like he could do anything. Since he was staring down the barrel of a gun that could level a city, he was going to need every bit of confidence that he could muster. Despite Ship's efforts, the fusion cannon fired. An enormous beam of energy lanced forward, and all that stood between it and its target was a single alien. As he floated in space, Feedback raised his hands, his fingers pointed at the beam. Just before the energy struck him, it flowed into the sockets. Feedback gritted his teeth and narrowed his eyes. This was a lot of energy, but he couldn't afford to let any of it get past him. Lives could be at stake. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the beam ceased, and Feedback lowered his hands. Normally, he'd feel a rush after absorbing energy, but now he was out of air. Just as he began to lose consciousness, he saw a familiar blue and red-garbed hero heading towards him. Ben opened his eyes to see that he was in the infirmary aboard the watchtower. The strange thing was, the lights were all out. Then he remembered, the fusion cannon had fired, and he'd absorbed the shot with Feedback. But how did he end up here? You're awake. Before Ben could react, a blur rushed toward him and wrapped him in a hug. When his vision finally cleared, he could see Supergirl holding on to him for dear life. Also, Kara. Ben wheezed, air. Sorry. Supergirl let up some of the pressure but still kept her arms around him. What were you thinking? Ben shrugged. I was thinking that I couldn't let the watchtower blow up whatever it was aimed at. Then he frowned. What was it aimed at? Supergirl had a haunted look in her eyes. Cadmus headquarters. Ben froze. If having a giant space gun aimed at you wasn't provocation, he didn't know what was. Then he remembered that Cadmus HQ was surrounded by a small town. Did anyone get hurt? Supergirl smiled. No, you managed to absorb all of the energy. Ben let out a sigh of relief. How long was I out? Only a few minutes, thankfully. Why? Ben got out of the bed. Because we've still got work to do. When Ben and Supergirl got back to the observation deck, they found John hanging up a phone. The Martian turned to them and gave Ben a nod, as did Green Arrow. The happiest, of course, was Ship, who jumped out of a console and into Ben's arms. Ship. The little alien cried, happy to see his friend. Hey, buddy, I'm glad that I'm okay too. Good to see you up, Ben, Arrow said with a smile. How are you feeling? Like I got hit by a giant cannon, Ben replied, but other than that, I'm fine. Who was John talking to? Green Arrow lost his smile. The president. Ben and Supergirl looked at each other nervously. What did he say? Asked Supergirl. John spoke up. He knows that the fusion cannon fired, and he knows that we were aimed at Cadmus. However, he also knows that no one was hurt. There is a matter that the founding members need to discuss. Ben, are you well enough to assist in getting the station up and running again? Ben nodded. Yeah, I'm good. Besides, I have a feeling we're gonna need every advantage we can get. Cadmus, new headquarters, unknown location. Amanda Waller watched as several soldiers and technicians began reassembling her office. It had been a close call, escaping before the League's space cannon had fired. It had all been a moot point, of course, since the beam had been stopped by Ben Tennyson, if the reports were accurate. Still, they would have to be more careful in the future. When she began to think of that future, she scowled and pulled out her phone. She dialed a number and waited. After only a few seconds, a voice answered her. "I'm surprised to hear from you, Amanda," said the president, "since my boys at the NSA can't find you anywhere." "We had a security breach at Cadmus," explained Waller, "and I had the facility scrubbed and moved per standard protocol. I wasn't able to get in contact with you until now, sir." Waller smiled grimly. Even if the Justice League's weapon had hit, they would only have fired on an abandoned building. "Good, that confirms that there were no casualties." "Not for lack of trying," said Waller, then felt a bitter taste on her tongue as she said the next part, "If it hadn't been for that shapeshifter, there would have definitely been collateral damage." "We don't know that the League fired on purpose," said the president. "I just got off the phone with the Martian. He claims that someone hijacked their weapon and fired it at you in order to incriminate them." "Oh, this was retaliation, sir, no doubt about it." Waller scowled. "We captured the question, they busted him out, and an hour later, it's death from above." The president sighed. "If you're right, it's our worst fears realized." "Yes, sir, what are you going to do about it?" "I'm weighing my options." Waller's scowl deepened. "Mr. President, if we're where we think we are, Cadmus is your only option." "I'll let you know, Amanda. Stay on high alert." Waller hung up. This was why she hated politics: too much talking, not enough doing. Well, no more. If it got her fired, so be it. She was going to remove a threat to her country. She marched over to one of the training rooms, where she was met by General Eiling. "Ma'am? What's going on?" "I'm done with waiting for the go-ahead," said Waller. "Somebody's got to do something about the League." Waller entered the training room, where she saw a figure pushing up against a machine that was pushing down at over 1 million tons of pressure. "I take it you're fit for duty again?" Waller asked. Galatea smirked as she lifted the machine with only one hand. "Never been fitter." "Good," said Waller, "come with me." Galatea lowered the weight and followed her to another part of the base. Inside, past an empty room, was a massive vault. "Your mission is to take down the Justice League," said Waller, as she typed in a code to open the vault, "and you're going to need help." As the final part of the code was entered, the vault opened, revealing dozens of identical figures. While the originals had disappeared, the DNA of the Ultiman was still usable. They had been cloned over and over until 20 teams of 5 stood before them. Waller glanced at Galatea. "Get it done."
And that concludes this episode. If you enjoyed it, I'd seriously love it if you guys could leave a like on the video, as it genuinely helps out so much, and it keeps me going, plus it takes only 1 second. That said, have a wonderful day. See you in the next one.